Their work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
Mr. Scout. I know you're still weighing whether to return to Lumen. But the mark I've come to know is happy.
Hello, is anyone there? Is the board on? It's Marquez from Macro...
What you all did was one of the most painful moments in the history of this company.
What the hell?
But the four of you have become known as the face of Severance reform.
Okay, so we're not in trouble?
I don't think so. Milchick said we're famous.
All of us equally, or one of us is like the star?
Now if you feel that you can't go on.
So what the hell did you guys see up there?
It's not our world up there.
And your life is filled with much confusion.
My Audie's wife died a few years ago. Except the woman is Miss Casey.
So what are you gonna do?
I gotta get her out of here.
Mark, your innie said she's alive.
This is obscene.
I just want to be sure.
And your world around is coming down.
Why did you do this? What is this all about?
Do you know something about Gemma?
Mark, there'll be no honeymoon ending for you.
Their work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
You don't value them. You fear them. We fear no one.
I'm tightening the leash.
If we let this happen to Miss Casey, who's gonna step up when it happens to us?
Now. Goodbye, Marquez.
Wait!
My name is Miss Huang. It's my first day here as deputy manager. Mark W.
Why are you a child?
Because of when I was born.
Miss Marcia White on the 9th floor. Specialties department, looking for a gold thimble. The odds are that you'll find it. But there are even better odds that you'll find something else. Because this isn't just a department store. This happens to be the Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone. Welcome one, welcome all to a very special edition of the Severance Aftershow. I still cannot believe we are entering the final 2 episodes, but I must say this was a really, really good one. I enjoyed this episode from start to finish. I know coming off episode 8, not everybody likes the kind of side stories where you dive a little bit deeper into a character. I enjoy them personally, but I understand they're not for everybody. But I get the feeling this was one of those episodes that it did feel like it was a return to regular Severance form. We got to see all of our usual characters. We got to see pretty much the whole cast, check in with them, where their storylines are at this point in time. And I enjoyed it. I'm still not quite sure how high I would rank this episode. I still really need to think about it a little bit more and definitely watch it again. But I enjoyed it. I did enjoy the episode for the most part. I didn't find myself feeling it drag at any point, really. But what about you? What was your first impressions of episode 9? Was it fun to be back on the severed floor and see all of our usual faces again?
I mean, I feel the same. I feel like right now I don't even have a rating for it because we kind of went all over the place, right? We kind of saw a little bit of all of our characters. I think it was way better than the last episode. So I definitely know that I liked it much more. But so much happened. I have like a pile of notes because so much happened, so much development, really. I can't believe that we just have one more episode. I'm kind of scrambling to think, how are they going to wrap everything up? While a lot of stuff happened, I don't think enough happened for it to all come together.
That is a good point. While it was a good episode and it did feel like a return to their regular format, in terms of like plot and anything like that, we didn't really learn anything. It felt more of a episode maneuvering pieces into place for next week. A setup episode. It was essentially a setup episode. And I usually like to get a little bit more than just setup in the penultimate episode. There's a reason why it's the penultimate episode. It's because it's the the show before the show kind of thing. So I understand setup definitely needs to be laid in there, but it would have been nice to get a little bit more meat on the bone, I guess, in terms of learning a little bit more about what's going on with Cold Harbor. I know we heard him mention it a few times, but we still know absolutely no idea what it is. We could get a little hint that with Cobell saying once Cold Harbor is done, it's already too late. She's dead by then, referring to Gemma. So it seems like Gemma's life may actually be in jeopardy in terms of this Cold Harbor finishing actually killing her, which is something we just talked about in the pregame show before we went live, before the episode aired, where I had a feeling that the Easter egg of that book, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, was going to be a little bit of a foreshadowing for maybe how Gemma's story would end as well, with her dying. I hope that's not the case, but it seems like Cold Harbor getting to 100% completion can threaten her very life, based on what Cobell said. But yeah, other than that, we didn't really learn a whole lot new. It was more set up and maneuvering pieces into place. But with the final episode being 75, 76 minutes in runtime, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I know it's an extended episode, which I have a feeling they're going to need every single possible minute of that screen time. Because as you mentioned, there's a lot of loose ends to still tie up and only one episode left to do it.
Yeah, I think well, they always surprise me. Sorry. Because I always think, how are they going to maneuver this? How are they going to fix like Helly and Mark? How are they going to fix some horrible thing that they showed us, right? And they always manage to do it simply, elegantly, and swiftly. So I do have a lot of hope that they're going to be able to wrap everything up in a way that's going to totally make sense for us. I do see that the chat was celebrating that the Twilight Zone was totally part of it. And usually, when we mention something, like when you mentioned something, it's kind of hinted at, but not in the way that the Twilight Zone. This one, it was full dialogue. They really went into the actual details of the episode. So I do see that the chat, the Sevis were celebrating that. I was super excited when I saw that.
I was too. I'm not going to lie. I thought that was really cool when I saw that. I mean, I know you're a huge fan of Twilight Zone too. It's probably my favorite show of all time, right up there, number 1, number 2. And anytime I see an episode title that happens to be also a title of the Twilight Zone, I always try to take a closer look at that, especially knowing the context behind it. Ben Stiller, of course, is a huge Twilight Zone fan, and he's been on record multiple times saying that the Twilight Zone was a huge creative influence behind Severance. And you can totally see why. Like, a lot of the themes, a lot of the weird stuff that is happening on Severance, it totally feels like you're watching an episode of Twilight Zone every once in a while. And I know a lot of people have likened it to Black Mirror as well. I haven't seen Black Mirror, but I know the gist of what Black Mirror is about. And people have been comparing, Severance to that every once in a while. I know I need to check out Black Mirror. I hear a lot of good things about it. There are a lot of good things about it.
That's not acceptable, Jeremy. It's not acceptable. You have to watch Black Mirror. It's... Of course, they take a lot from the Twilight Zone, because at this point, the Twilight Zone did so many episodes and dived into like so many different topics and really dealt with the spooky, right? The paranormal, spooky, science, sci-fi, that it's almost impossible, if you're going to do something sci-fi, that there's not an episode of the Twilight Zone that fits it. But Black Mirror is amazing. So yeah, you have to.
I'm going to have to check it out. I have heard a lot of good things about it from a lot of people, so I am going to have to check it out at some point. I know they've had tons of seasons at this point, so there's a lot to catch up on, but I will check it out for sure. But yes, guys, let us know, what did you think of episode 9? What was some of your favorite scenes? What scenes stood out to you the most? Were there scenes maybe you didn't like? Did you not like the episode? That's totally cool. All, of course, is welcome. We just want to know what you guys really have to think. And let's see who we have in this awesome chat, shall we? Let me scroll up here a little bit. And yes, it was really cool to see the Twilight Zone thing be accurate as we see, what was up with the thimble thing. That's the thimble thing. Basically, when we hear that scene at the end of the episode with Cobell trying to gain entry into the birthing cabins, there's a secret code that apparently they need to say, especially if you're arriving without an appointment, which she did. But luckily for Cobell, knowing the ins and outs of Lumon, she knew the secret code to say, and all of that was basically a direct reference to the Twilight Zone episode that I talked about in my episode 9 predictions video, The After Hours, which of course is the same title of this episode of Severance. And in that episode, there's some interesting themes that kind of correlate and cross over a little bit into what Severance is doing as well, with the whole hidden floor, the testing floor being hidden, with the Twilight Zone, the 9th floor being a floor that isn't supposed to exist, mannequins turning into humans. I know a lot of people are likening that to robots and how Gemma may have been a robot the whole time. I've seen that theory pop up a few times, which is an interesting one. Who knows? But yeah, that's basically the golden thimble thing, where that came from, what it's referring to. It was just a code that Cobell used to gain entry to the cabin, and the deeper meaning was it relates back to the title and the Twilight Zone parallel. And I mentioned this in the pregame show, but I'll mention it again here as well. Once Severance is over, once we have finished the entire season 2, and once it's over, it's done, we're waiting for season 3 to come around, I am going to go and I'm going to compile a list of Twilight Zone episodes that are very Severance based, or are very Severance influenced. There's just quite a few right off the top of my head that I can think about that would be incredibly interesting parallels to a lot of the stuff that we see here on Severance. We see a lot of very weird, trippy themes and plots laid out, and you'll see a lot of those in some of these episodes of Twilight Zone as well. So once season 2 of Severance is completely done, I am going to go in and I will gather a list of some Twilight Zone episodes that are similar, and we're going to do a little mini Twilight Zone watch party. We'll probably do it in the Discord. It probably won't be a YouTube thing. It'll probably just be something we do in the Discord. Maybe we'll do a stream discussing it before or afterwards if that's what people want. But yeah, after Severance is over, that's probably going to be something that I'm looking forward to diving into, finding some specific Twilight Zone episodes that I think you guys would really like. If you do like Severance, you'll probably like these ones I'm going to pick. And we'll do a little mini Twilight Zone watch party, and we'll watch some of the the episodes that are a little bit more Severance-esque, I guess you could say. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, that sounds super fun. And I see the chat, like, they are huge Twilight Zone fans, and it makes sense, right? If you like that, then you would like Severance, and like even from, right? So that's going to be amazing. That's going to be super fun.
Yeah, it is kind of a perfect fit, isn't it? Because and I was I don't know why I was surprised. I shouldn't have been surprised at all when I saw how many Twilight Zone fans there actually were. Like, just in our chat alone, I imagine there's more spread out all throughout the Severance fandom. But yeah, no, that was super cool to see how many people are actually big Twilight Zone fans, because Twilight Zone has been such a big influence on anything and everything sci-fi that has come after it. Rod Serling and Twilight Zone were so ahead of their time, like so ahead of their time. A lot of their stories, a lot of just their general themes and concepts were just so ahead of anything anybody else was doing at that time. And some of them, most of them, still hold up so well to this day. So that'll be fun, and that was super cool to see that we do have a lot of Twilight Zone fans here. And like you said, it makes sense. It totally makes sense with how Severance is, with how From is. I shouldn't be surprised at all that there's a lot of people who watch both of these that also like Twilight Zone as well, because there's a lot of crossover there. A lot of crossover, indeed. Indeed. Let's see who else we got. We got Scotty in the house. What is up, Scotty? We got Starry. We got Steed in the house. We got Zombie. What is up, everybody? Good to see each and every one of you. I see James is in the house as well. Welcome, James. I see 88 Keys. I say Lupita in the house as well. Welcome, one. Welcome, all. See Howdy. So which character is the mannequin who doesn't know she's a mannequin? And if anything, I think it could be Gemma, not so much Gemma, but Miss Casey. Miss Casey seems a little bit more of that kind of character who is this very robotic, very kind of mannequin-esque character. So if I had to pick any one character who was in that kind of similar spot, I would probably say the Miss Casey persona. Maybe not Gemma, but the Miss Casey persona. What about you? You think she's the closest to the mannequin reference in that episode?
I think so. Because also, I remember the way that you describe Gemma's experience as her being put in separate rooms and being dressed up in these different outfits. And I mean, that's exactly what you do with a mannequin, right? You dress them in different outfits, you display them, you have them in different experiences, quote unquote, like you stated that the dentist was doing with Gemma. One thing that I found super interesting is that when I first watched that episode of The Twilight Zone, it's the woman that's selling her the gold thimble that caught my attention because she's wearing a very tailored pencil skirt and very like refined, tailored made clothes. And her hair was quite severe. And she reminds me of what Gemma looks like as Miss Casey. As Miss Casey, her clothes was always like super tailored. Her hair, while it was nice, it was quite severe. And if you look side by side at that woman who's selling her the gold thimble and Gemma, they look alike. They really do. Like their
Wow.
style of dress. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, I totally missed that. But yeah, no, that does now that I'm picturing her in my mind, the way that she has her hair done and everything. Yeah, it is a bit Gemma-esque. Yeah, I didn't even notice it, but you are 100% right. It definitely has that Gemma vibe to her. No, that's interesting. It's again in Twilight Zone. If you're going to pick anything to get inspired from, Twilight Zone is the thing to take inspiration from. Again, just about anything and everything sci-fi that has come out in the last 50, 70 years has been incredibly influenced by Twilight Zone, even if they don't even realize it. A lot of the concepts and themes that so much of today's sci-fi uh, put out is very much rooted in Twilight Zone lore. But yeah, I like that. I like that. Gemma is the mannequin. Yeah, and yeah, let me know what you guys think as well. If anybody who has seen that episode of The Twilight Zone, is there anybody else that you would think would fit the mannequin persona better than Gemma? Is it Gemma? Is it Miss Casey? Like, which one do you think fits it better? Or is there another character entirely? People who do know the story. What do you guys think? Who do you think would be the mannequin of this episode? I tend to think Miss Casey a little more than Gemma, but yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think. Love to know what you guys think. Who is the Miss Casey of this episode? Yeah.
Wow, Scotty.
I know, right? Jeez. I didn't even realize I clicked on it until it was too late. Does Jame get a lot of his girls pregnant? That's actually an interesting question. Because yeah, it seems like there's this secret code that anyone can come to this birthing cabin for someone for some kind of birth that they want off the books, someone that's not officially a part of the Egan family. And yeah, just that one little exchange back and forth between them, it definitely gave you the impression that this is something that Jame Egan probably does often, have illegitimate children. And that's what leads me to believe that there is a slight possibility that he could be Cobell's father. Like, if he is fathering these illegitimate children and he's been doing it for a very long time, it would make perfect sense why he took such a liking to Cobell, why she was his prized student, why he felt that he could, steal her work. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Cobell was the daughter of Jame Egan. But no, what did you think about that scene? Do you think that that's something that Jame Egan has done a while? Did you also get that sense where Jame Egan is often kind of having women brought here discreetly to give birth to illegitimate children?
Of course. And it's the way that they said it. She said she's one of Egan's,
Exactly.
right? So
Yeah.
almost like this happens constantly. This is something that happens, right? With him specifically. And I think that that gives all of the people that have the theory that Cobell is part of the Egan family, it gives you more, facts to back that up because that would make perfect sense. Also, when we go back to the episode where we saw more of Cobell's mother, the aunt has a very specific line that didn't make sense at the time. She says that room cannot be open until everybody who knew her rests with Kier. And
Yeah.
so if you bring those two things together, I think that it could give you the case of potentially he is Miss Cobell's father, right? And there is
Hey.
something about the mother that if somebody was to know or find in the room would point to that.
Yeah.
And so, of course, right, these people live their life in like a corporate cult where everything is perfection. They couldn't be going around having illegitimate children. They wouldn't want that to be known.
Yeah. No, that does make perfect sense, especially with a company like Lumen, with the family like the Eagans, who have kind of propped themselves up to be this perfect, almost royal-esque family. I mean, and that seems like that has kind of taken the place of royalty here in the States. These big kind of corporate, entities, these multinational conglomerate corporations, they do kind of have that sense of propping themselves up like they are some kind of royalty. And you definitely get the sense that Egan has that vibe about them, that they're looking at this, they're projecting themselves, Lumen, the Egans, more of a religious kind of experience, more of a religion than a business. And, we've seen that reflected all throughout the show from the very beginning, from all of the weird quotes that they're always quoting about stuff Kier used to say and the weird stuff that Jame himself says. It is, and I know a lot of people have likened it to Scientology. A lot of people have brought up a ton of parallels that they keep seeing in Severance that they also see in Scientology as well, which is understandable. I'm not a Scientology expert, but I know enough that you can definitely understand where those comparisons are coming from. But yeah, it definitely does project itself as a little bit more of a religious organization as opposed to just a business, for sure,
Mhm.
for sure. Yeah, it's and again, this was another good thing. I see Milchick's shipped Miss Huang, and the way just before Cobell gives the password namesake woman on the ninth floor. Yes, the ninth floor, the Twilight Zone episode. But Milchick was great in this episode. I loved Milchick's scenes. I always like Milchick's scenes. I feel like he's a great actor. Trammell Tillman, who plays him, is one of the best actors on the show. So I always love a good Milchick scene, but this one in particular, I love how he stands up to Drummond. And we've never seen that. We've never seen anybody even come close to standing up to Drummond. He's always this big, larger than life, very imposing figure. Like he's just one of those Lumen employees that is so high up, and you never want to challenge him because he does have that intimidation factor to him. Just his overall presence and his size. But I loved Milchick in this episode. He didn't back down whatsoever. He started the conversation obeying everything that Drummond was saying to him, and it's like midway through the conversation, he kind of realized that, wait a minute, I'm head of the severed floor. You might be my boss, but you do owe me a certain degree of respect. After all, I am a Lumen boss here, overseeing our most sensitive floor. And I loved how Milchick kind of realized his worth in that episode, in that moment, because I feel like that's something he's been struggling with a little bit this season, ever since receiving those horrible photos. I feel like he's been kind of struggling with understanding what is his value, what is his worth to this company, how much does he mean to Lumen. And we saw how bad his negative performance review affected him a few episodes ago. And it feels like this was an episode, it seems like that scene was him kind of coming back from that a little bit, pulling himself out of that hole a little bit. I think Milchick still has a very long time, long ways to go before he gets any kind of like full-on redemption arc. But seeing that he at least has the capability inside of him to stand up to Lumen, to stand up to Drummond, one of the most imposing, intimidating characters, and telling him, hey, no, it's not up to me. What happens to Mark on the outside is not my job. I am head of the severed floor. I am in charge of any Mark. You are in charge of Audi Mark. I loved him standing up in that scene.
Yeah, and what I noticed about that specific scene is that when Milkshake realizes there's something wrong here, like this shouldn't be happening to me, is when Drummond starts doing to Milkshake what Milkshake did to Howley, the break room ritual of saying apologize, do it again and again. I'm not buying it. It's not good enough until you believe it. And I think it's when he realized, oh my God, like he keeps asking me like again and again. As a subordinate, this is what I do to them. This is what I do to the innies, and he's doing this to me. I think that he realized this is not okay and I need to be myself. I love that the way that he stood up to Drummond was also using his vocabulary, because he was
Yeah.
told to stop using big words and he was like, I'm
Yeah.
going to use all of the big words, right? And he has that, like, now is going to be iconic, right? Like the most polite way to say something horrible to someone.
Yeah.
And then he wanted to make sure that Drummond understood it, so he like translates it.
Yeah.
But I love that he was doing it in his style, in his way. He was being himself. He loves his vocabulary, he loves his big words, so he was using them and not allowing them to, walk all over him. And it brings back the title of the episode, After Hours. When I saw that interaction, him saying, my job is while Mark is here to get him to do his job. While he's not on the clock, after hours, right? That's Drummond's job. And so it made me think of the title of the episode.
It's actually a very good point. Yeah, the after hours. He is in charge of the severed hours. He's not in charge of overtime contingencies and what they're doing when they're in Audi form in their regular home world. Like, it's not his jurisdiction. And that's actually a really good point. I'm glad he brought that up. I'm glad you brought that up. In terms of him like finding himself again, what you just mentioned was the perfect example of that, where mid-sentence he starts just talking like his regular old Milchick self again, where he starts bringing up all these grand, big, sophisticated words. And it felt like he was finding himself again. It felt like he was standing up to Lumon. He was demanding at least a degree of respect for everything he's given to this company, for being head of the severed floor. He's feeling like they're not respecting his contributions to the company. I would feel the same way if I was him. But it was good to see him not only stand up to Drummond, but to stand up to Drummond in that way, like you mentioned, where he starts bringing up his he starts talking in his sophisticated manner again. It was just such a good scene to see Milchick. And I know not everybody is a huge Milchick fan for everything he's done to other characters and stuff like that, which is totally understandable. I do think he has a long way to go before he gets any kind of full redemption, but it was at least nice to see him, at least to know that he has it inside of him to potentially do this. I like that. Milchick was about to cry because he realized he was all about his work and had no balance. He was the iceberg. Milchick knew Mark was right. It is just work. Get a life, Seth. Yes, do it, Seth. Do it, Seth. Cracking under all the stress. I think he was. I do think he was. I think before this episode, like especially right after he got the performance review in particular, it did feel like he was cracking a little bit under all the stress, all the pressure. I imagine he was going into that performance review, and I don't know, I get the feeling he probably wasn't expecting it to be that bad. I do think the complaints from Miss Huang probably took him a little bit off guard. I don't think he was expecting to walk into a complaint of him using paper clips the wrong way and saying too many big words. I don't think he was expecting that. But, I think he was expecting to maybe catch a little bit of flack from the Orpo, the failed outdoor experience. But I think the other two kind of threw him for a loop to the point where he was a little thrown off by this performance review, because I don't think he was expecting those other two things, I guess. And yeah, he was cracking under the pressure a little bit, under the pressure that Lumon was putting on him to essentially change who he is at his very core. I mean, we've talked about this numerous times. How much is Milchick's vocabulary like very much a part of who he is? It's a part of his personality. It's part of his identity. To make him strip that away from himself is making him strip a part of himself away that just comes naturally.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's like you stated, it does nobody any harm. It really doesn't. It's not something that is harmful. It's not something that would matter in the big picture of what his job is. It's just them trying to mold him in their image. And it's not very good. Usually, you would think that the company would want excellence and the best from you. But Milchick is realizing that he is excellent. His vocabulary is excellent. And they want that to be simplified. That's not a change for the better. That's a change for the worst.
It is. It is. I do totally agree. It's yeah, and again, it's going to be interesting to see how much he continues to evolve, I guess, because I do think this seed of doubt, I think, has been planted inside Milchick ever since the very beginning of the season when he received those paintings. I think that was the first step of him, realizing that, wait a minute, maybe I'm not appreciated here. Maybe this is not the right place. Maybe this is not a place I should be loyal to. I think, again, it's going to take him a long time before he fully comes around to that, but I think that seed of doubt is planted there a little bit. I think this was a step in the right direction for him in terms of maybe finally, eventually getting to a place where Cobell is, where she's completely done with Lumen and the Eagans and wants some revenge even, maybe. Maybe. Yeah, Drummond got told off. Drummond got told off, for sure. Milchick is really growing. It was a little bit of growth for him, for sure. It was a little bit of growth for him, for sure. And he got rid of Miss Huang, who was too big for her britches. Oh my god. Now, I know you're a big fan of Miss Huang, Mini Milkshake, as we call her. What did you think of this scene? I mean, of Milchick kind of graduating her in one sense, passing her through the fellowship program, yet making her destroy a very personal and sentimental object that she has an attachment to, and going so far as to say that this is a sacrifice that Lumen requires of you. Is that real, or is this something that Milchick just made Miss Huang do as a form of revenge a little bit? What do you think? You think this was all Milchick's kind of orchestrating, making her smash this, or do you think this was like by the book?
You know what? I didn't think about that, but now that you bring that up, that
Yeah.
would be something Milkshake would do because he makes up things, right? Like
Yeah.
the crush passion, or like he'll
Yeah.
make up something to tell the innies, you're stars, right? You're famous.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
whole world thinks that you're amazing, right? So he'll make up
It's
things.
the tallest
Um,
waterfall in the world.
Exactly. So I could see him doing that, right, to her. Now that you
Mhm.
bring it up, it's probably that. I felt so bad for Minnie Milkshake.
I
I
did
felt
feel
so
bad for
bad
her.
for her. The way that he explained that also your bed is going to be moved from your parents to
Yeah.
the institute, right?
Yep.
And it was really interesting, the name of it, the Empathy Center, the Gunnell Egan Empathy Center. And when I
Ooh.
think about it, it's empathy. Like, why would you need an entire section or branch of a corporation to focus on empathy?
Yeah.
Something so basic that shouldn't we all have empathy? And why is this specifically her job, right? He then says that she's going to be doing global reform, which made me immediately think of one of our sevies. I always remember what the sevies say because they have all the answers, right? The chat knows all. Um, a couple of live streams ago, we were talking about Xavier's idea of a united council through Lumen that is trying to work on global reform. And so they mentioned it in this episode. It brought that back to me. So indeed, Lumen is working with politicians or globally in order to reform the world itself.
Yes. No, I think that makes perfect sense, and I 100% agree. Like, yeah, why do you need a whole center of empathy to begin with? Like you said, this is a basic human quality that most people are born with, unless you're like a sociopath or, like you have some other kind of deficiency. The average human feels empathy for everybody. I mean, how can you not? And and maybe that's just a part of the conditioning that Lumen employees go under. Now, when they're grabbing children essentially this young, and someone brought it up, someone said it pretty well, and I do agree with this as well. Ronald Bolton says Milchick forcing Miss Huang to crush her toy was a great display of child labor and the terrible unevenness that interaction. She has a little girl in over her head, and you do get that sense that Lumen is doing this to these young children, to grabbing the same thing that happened to Cobell, where they're grabbing these very young girls, they're throwing them into this Myrtle Egan school for girls, and then they're even putting more of them into this prestigious program known as the Wintertide Fellowship. It's all in an effort to kind of groom these poor children into becoming the perfect Lumen employee that they want. And I feel like as they put people through that programming, that is how they lose a little bit of their empathy, because they're programming, they're conditioning these children into thinking a certain way, into believing in a certain sort of doctrine that Lumen is pushing. So maybe that's why they need a full-on empathy wing, because they have really program the empathy out of these people by the time they get to graduation, because this is a grueling process that I imagine Lumen puts these poor girls through. It's definitely not something that anyone would, any parent would probably want their child to sign up for. And yes, it screams of child labor, which is exactly what we saw Cobell talking about in last week's episode, when she was forced, and her whole town was forced to work in an ether factory as children of 8 years old. It's sick. It's messed up, and it points to the lengths that Lumen is willing to go to achieve their own ends of having this perfect workforce.
And it makes me recall one of Little Mini Milkshakes lines that we were all kind of shocked by, when the innies demand a funeral for Irving, and Mini Milkshake is
Yes.
disagreeing with it, and she does
Yeah.
not have empathy for them. She does not have empathy for what they're going through, and she tells Mr. Milkshake, you shouldn't let them have funerals. It makes them feel like they're people. That in itself
Yes.
shows you that she does not have empathy for what the innies are going through. However, something that I found really interesting is that in this episode, when Dylan expresses his desire to completely resign,
Yeah.
she looks at his form and notices that he is checking all the boxes. He feels
Yes.
lonely, he feels upset, he feels anxiety. And upon reflection of the fact that Dylan is feeling this way, she says, I'm sorry, I should have facilitated better. So that in itself
Yes.
shows you that she has grown some empathy towards the innies. And I think that that empathy comes from what had just happened to her, not having
Mhm.
an option, just being told this is what you're going to do. You're getting shipped all the way to another country. I
Yeah.
assume it's another country.
Yeah.
Um, and you don't have a say in it. You woke up this morning, you didn't know that's what the day was going to bring, but in fact, that's what the day is bringing. So it makes me think of how she grew, basically, by having to experience what the innies go through on a everyday basis, really.
It really is. Like, it does. It paints a very bleak picture, doesn't it? Of just everything as a whole. When you take a step back and you really see the perception of everything that Lumen does, what they put these children through, grooming them in a sense, programming them in a sense to form to fit a certain function. It does. It paints the whole, like, you really get a sense of just this craziness that is going on here. And I think Scotty brings up a really good point, which was, yeah, it's like she can't even go home to visit her parents. Just send her bed to school. That's how profound this is, where Lumen at this point, by the time you're put through this Wintertide program, you're on the path to becoming what they want you to become. They're not going to risk you going home to your family and getting some kind of idea in your head like your family's more important than Lumen. At that point, you're well on your way to indoctrination. So yeah, we see that even when they graduate this Wintertide program, they don't even have a chance to go home and see their family. They literally ship their bed right to where they're going next. That is so sad. That's so fucked up.
Mhm. Yeah,
Crazy.
and I love this picture of Mini Milkshake because
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
so often we see Mini Milkshake being so cold and calculated and mean, right? And very grown up for her age, the way that she behaves. But when they showed her waiting for this bus with her little earmuffs and her little face just terrified, you could really see that she is dreading what is to come next. She doesn't know really where she's going. She didn't get a choice. And her little face here reminds us that she is a child after all. She's just a little girl. And the fact that they made her crush her toy, the symbolism in that itself. Like you are giving up your childhood for this job. So you are sacrificing this toy, the symbolism of childhood, of innocence for a job, for the company, for um, Gunnel Egan, who is Gunnel Egan? I don't recall. but she is sacrificing her life and her childhood in order to provide Lumen with the best possible worker. And that in itself is quite tragic.
It is. It's tragic, especially when, a child like Miss Wong should be in school right now, learning her times tables, learning, the beginnings of physics and like this is not how a child's life is supposed to be lived under these kind of conditions, kind of, breeding them into this to serve this function of this company. And yeah, can't see her parents equals Scientology. I hear that's a thing as well. And yeah, as Scotty brings up, it's kind of not just child labor; it's child trafficking in a sense. Yeah, where they're taking children, they're sending them to this school, and after they're done with this wintertide program, yes, they send them off, and they're trafficking them to Lord knows where. We know Lumen has buildings and companies in 206 different companies in 206 different countries in this world, the world that it's set in. So yeah, it is. It's not just kind of child labor. It's child trafficking in a sense as well. So that's a good point. Radar was the best actor in this episode. Give that good boy a treat. I am with you right there. It was really cool to see Radar and Irv. And yeah, I guess we can talk a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about Irv and Burt, where we finally got some interesting information. It was something that a lot of us were kind of already guessing, that there was a little bit more to Burt than was originally portrayed, that he had a deeper tie to Lumen. I mean, again, Fields kind of letting it slip that he had been working for Lumen for 20 years was a pretty dead giveaway for a lot of us. A lot of us were expecting this. But in this episode, we finally got the definitive confirmation that yes, Burt is a little shadier than we thought. He has been working, his Audi has also been working for Lumen this entire time, driving people to he doesn't know where Lumen does who knows what to them. And I think based on his guilty conscience, I think he knows that Lumen is hurting or killing these people that he is driving. I mean, yes, he was just a driver. He never hurt anybody himself. And I do believe him when he says that. But I think in the back of Burt's mind, he knew what he was doing. He knew that he was driving these people to their doom, to their demise. It seemed like that's weighing very heavily on him. And in this episode, we see Audi Burt and Audi Irving reconnect a little bit. Irving, of course, comes home. Burt's already in his car, in his house. And I love how Burt kind of reads his description of him that he had wrote down in his Lumen research. He's like, man, that's harsh. Like, that was super funny. And it was, I don't know, every time these two are on screen together, they just always have really good scenes. They have good chemistry on screen. And this was interesting to see. Apparently, somebody finally was able to get through enough to Burt for him to kind of break his own programming, in a sense, break his own conditioning, his own kind of loyalty that he's held to Lumen this whole time. Because we hear Ben Stiller say inside the episode, since Irving was investigating Lumen, it was left to Burt to take care of Irving. So this wasn't just Burt doing this on his own. Lumen sent Burt to Irving to probably drive him somewhere else where they could take him out. But instead of doing that, instead of obeying Lumen, he does this. And he gets him to the train station and tells him you have to leave and you can never come back. Which, of course, is where we see the wonderful Radar. But this was really good to see. I mean, I feel like in this episode, especially at the train station, we got a small glimpse of what Innie Irving and Innie Burt used to look like the genuine feelings that they had for each other. And it did remind me a little bit of Innie Burt and Innie Irving kind of reconnecting in a sense, even if only for a brief minute before they also had to get separated. But I thought this was a really cool scene where Burt was kind of recognizing that he had a feeling that Irving was going to be put in danger. He didn't want that to happen. So instead of bringing him to wherever Lumen wanted him to be brought, he stood up. He stepped up to Lumen and kind of saved Irving. And even Irving says to him, Lumen's going to come after you for this. And he still did it. So there has to be a part of Burt who knows he's putting himself and maybe even Fields in incredible danger by doing this. What was your initial reaction to Burt and Irving? And let me know in the chat as well, guys. What did you guys think of Burt and Irving in this episode?
I think it was very moving, right? And it reminded me of their connection that they had when Bert took Irving to that beautiful room where they have all of the greenery. So he tells him, I've never experienced love. And because it was through an any form, right? They don't remember. They don't know what it's like. And the fact that Bert said, what I liked about Severance is getting the opportunity to be an innocent again. And my innocent fell in love with you. And so
Yes.
therefore he felt like he owed him. He owed him
Yeah.
to save him, to let him live, to let him go, right? And then they do this thing where they put their heads together. They did this in the greenery room when Bert
Yes.
wanted to kiss Irving, and
Just
Irving
naturally.
said, I'm not ready. He said, I'm not ready. I'm sorry, right? And he said, it's okay, just stay here with me. He held his hand and they did this thing where they put their heads together. And I found it really interesting that Irving, this is Audi. We are to assume that this is Audi Irving. He
Yeah.
says, I'm ready. I'm
Yes.
ready. Like
Yeah.
I want this love,
Yes.
right? To experience it in this lifetime. And he keeps saying, I'm ready. I'm ready. So it made me think, how can you recall something that you said as an innie?
Yeah.
A lot of people have been saying that potentially Irving has already been reintegrated,
Mhm.
but it doesn't quite fit because he said he doesn't remember what it's like
Yes.
to be loved. And then it reminded me of what you stated, that feelings can transcend the severance barrier. So maybe even though he doesn't remember, that feeling of not being ready and now being ready has transcended. And they did the same thing when they were innies. So potentially love transcends the severance barrier.
Maybe it is, and I could definitely see that being the case. I mean, I feel like Lumen is putting Gemma through all of these trials, and they're testing this severance barrier so rigorously. And if they're doing that, it's for a reason. It's because they at least believe that some things can transcend the severance barrier. Otherwise, they wouldn't be putting so much research into testing that. And I think, again, we've already seen some examples, some references of the severance barrier being transcended. Irving himself at the beginning of the season, I know we've said it a million times, but in episode 4, the only reason he was able to uncover Helly as Helena, uncover that Helly wasn't herself, was because he was feeling his Audi's training kick into him. Something that his Audi's training was transcending the severance barrier. And even Dan Erickson, the creator, talks a little bit about how maybe even some of the feelings that Helena has for Mark is something that may have transcended the severance barrier. And yeah, I could totally see that being a possibility because it seems so weird how how their Audis kind of fell into each other the very same way they did that their innies did, as you mentioned, even down to the exact same leaning on each other's head, the exact same thing. So yes, maybe a little bit of that love that Innie Irving and Innie Burt felt for each other, maybe it did transcend the severance barrier a little bit. Maybe their Audis did naturally feel that same connection to each other that their innies felt. And I know that's been another big question: is Irving reintegrated? Was Burt ever severed? I think Burt is severed. I do. I wasn't sure at first. At first, I wasn't 100% sure if Burt was just pretending to be severed and he was sent to kind of get close to Irving from the very beginning. But the more I see this, the more I do believe that Burt is really severed. I do think he does have an innie, and I do think he does have an outie. Because it seems like in this episode, they both kind of wanted to remember that love that they felt for one another. And Irving really wanted to remember it. And again, I could be wrong, but if I had to guess after this episode, I would say I think Burt is severed. But what about you guys in the chat, and what about you as well, PM? Because I know this has been a big topic of conversation that a lot of people have been bringing up ever since the dinner episode. People have been wondering, was Burt ever even severed? After this episode, where do you lean on that? Do you think Burt is really severed, or has he been pretending the whole time?
I would have to say that I do believe that he is severed because he seemed very genuine and very honest in the description of why he wanted to be severed. The fact that he liked the idea that he could be an innocent again.
Yeah.
And he also said that, when Irving said, I've never been loved, he said, well, now you have. Um, And they both agree, we can't remember, we don't know what it really feels like, but I know that my innocent fell in love with you. And I don't think that he would say that if he was not severed. I think that he would have those feelings, and there's no reason to save Irving unless he was genuinely severed and genuinely fell in love with him.
I do agree. I do agree. I mean, if he was just pretending this whole time and he was never really severed and maybe they never even really fell in love, like, yeah, there's no way it would have played out the way that it did like this. No, so I do. I tend to agree with you. I do think Burt is really severed. I don't think it was a game this whole time. I think he really is severed, and he just genuinely wanted to do the right thing here because he came across someone where he couldn't just drive them to where Lumen wanted them to drive them because he probably knew what would happen to this person and he feels for this person. So yeah, I do think Burt is severed. But what about you guys? What do you guys think in the chat? Is Burt really severed? Do you think he really has an innie or an outie, or do you think Burt was pretending the whole time? Because again, I know that was a huge thing that people were landing on both sides of up until this episode. Some people thought Burt was severed, some people think he isn't. What do you guys think after this episode? Burt is severed, says Falco. We got Howdy saying, I think Irving will return. I think he will as well, because, I mean, we've already lost Innie Irving, in a sense, where Innie Irving got switched off, got fired. I mean, who knows if we'll ever see Innie Irving again, or if Innie Irving even exists, or if he's been just completely wiped clean. But now they're taking the only Irving we had left, and they're throwing him on the train and sending him off into parts unknown. But I have to believe that we're going to see Irving again. I have to believe they would not write John Turturro's character off the show like that, like entirely. Even if his role is limited in season 3, I'm definitely expecting to see him again. I just feel like when you have someone like John Turturro's talent and Christopher Walken's talent, you use them to the best of your ability. And they are the best actors on the show, the most seasoned and veteran actors on the show. I mean, if this is where their storyline ultimately goes, then that's where their storyline goes, unfortunately. But I think Irving will return as well, Howdy. I tend to agree with you. I don't think we've seen the end of Irving. But what about you guys as well? And you as well, PM. You think we've seen the end of Irving, him getting on that train? Is that it for Irving, or do you think he'll return at some point in maybe season 3?
Well, I think Lisi here in the chat makes an excellent point. The Sevis know all, after all. He's gonna return because we need to figure out who he was speaking to and who he was making those phone calls. So they wouldn't just put that and then let Irving go without us actually finding out who was this person. A lot of us tend to think it was Ragabi. So I do agree with Lisi here in the chat. I think that he's going to return with the purpose of showing us who is behind the whole Mind Collective, the people that are working against Lumen.
Yeah. Yes, and I definitely get the feeling that they did not name drop that name for no reason. Like, I don't think that was some kind of throwaway line when Burt specifically mentions whole mind, and how we're all wondering, is there some kind of rebellion that's already kind of working against Lumen? Is Ragabi working alone? Is she connected to a bigger network? And I wouldn't be too surprised if whole mind was a larger network that Ragabi and maybe even Irving himself are both connected to in some way, that they're both working against Lumen or gathering info on Lumen. I could totally see that being the case. But yeah, I agree with Lisi as well. I think that's a very good point. I mean, they can't write Irving off the show entirely until we get his full story. His whole story hasn't been told yet. We have no idea who he was on the phone with, so that's a perfect point. So yeah, I think I'm about 99% sure we'll see Irving again. And again, you gotta finish his storyline for sure. For sure. But we also got Duce Falco, who has just gifted 10 memberships. Holy cow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10 memberships gifted. That is incredibly generous of you. Wow. Thank you so much, Falco. I cannot appreciate the support enough. Again, you guys have been so supportive of the streams, the videos, everything that we're doing here. We love talking about this show. It definitely is our favorite show that's currently on TV right now. I know PM and I are absolutely enjoying the heck out of it. I know you guys are as well. But yes, I can't thank each and every one of you enough for all of the support. You guys have been just incredibly awesome. You've been showing up for all the streams, all the videos. It really does mean a lot to me and to us, because we love talking about this show, and we love hearing from you guys in the chat what you guys are thinking as well. So thank you so much for the gift of the 10 memberships. Wow, that is incredibly generous of you. And
Yes! Do it, Seth!
Do it, Seth.
Sad. I love
Do
that.
it, Seth.
I'm gonna kill
Love
him,
it.
Mr. Milkshake.
I'm gonna kill him, Mr. Milkshake.
Irving, stop this! She's a fucking mole!
What are you doing?
I'm gonna kill her, Mr. Milchick!
I love it. I love it. Just excellent dialogue. This show really does produce some really, really excellent dialogue. I do love that. Yeah, great stuff. Again, thank you so much for the gift of the 10 memberships. That is incredibly generous of you. And again, anyone who did receive one of the memberships, of course, all members have access to the custom Severance emojis that we have down there, available to every member. And of course, if you are a member of the channel and you have a specific request for a Severance emoji that you want me to add to the list, I will always try and make that happen. If it's possible for me to make an emoji out of it, I will make it and upload it. The emojis are for the members. They're for you guys to use. So if there's ever a specific emoji that you want that you don't see, leave the suggestion in the comment section after the stream ends, or leave it in a different comment section from one of my other videos. I'll always be able to tell if you're a member or not, and I'll always try and make whatever custom emojis that you guys want, because ultimately they are for you guys to use in the chat. So I want you guys to have ones that you like. But thank you again so much, Falco, for the gift of the 10 memberships. Wow, it's incredibly generous. Just so incredibly generous. I am humbled, my friend. I am humbled. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Turturro is hot. A lot of people like John Turturro, and again, he's great. He's such a phenomenal actor. He's been around for so long. He's been in countless films and TV shows. The guy is legit. He's a legit stud. Irv may have been calling Fields, who wants any Burt to go to heaven with. Ooh, maybe. Yeah, we did hear a lot of talk about heaven and how Burt may have potentially got severed in the first place, so a version of him could go to heaven to be with Fields. So that's a very good point. Very good point as well. Face reveal. This and a great episode. Milchick was on fire tonight. Yes, Xavier Anderson, he absolutely was. And yeah, we were talking about that a little earlier, and it was one of my favorite Milchick scenes. Definitely. Seeing him kind of stand up to Drummond and kind of not take their shit for a change. Kind of actually, this is the Milchick I remember from season 1. The Milchick that didn't take any shit from anybody. And I loved how he stepped up in that moment and just was throwing it right back in Drummond's face. Really good. Really good. But yes, let's talk a little bit about this, because Jame Egan is one of those characters that we don't see a whole lot of. He hasn't been in a whole lot of screen time. Every time we see him, he's incredibly strange. This was an interesting episode where it starts off with this kind of sequence of, swimming in the pool to morning breakfast. And we see Jame be Jame-esque, where he's just always super weird. He just always seems super distant. I imagine this guy was a horrible father, like a horrible father. You can kind of understand why Helen is so fucked up. Growing up with a father like Jame Egan probably was not easy and not fun at all. But this was kind of funny. And even how he's kind of critiquing every little move that she makes, down to him saying, "I wish you would eat them raw." And I saw people talking about that in the chat in terms of why was Jame wanting her to eat raw eggs. That basically goes all the way back to Kier himself. Kier Eagan, I guess what was it? His favorite food was raw eggs?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yes,
so
it was.
Kier. Okay.
And what's really interesting is that it brings us back to kind of like the first episode. So the entire show really starts with Helly, its first day, right? So it takes us all the way back to season 1, where Mr. Milchick is walking her through and saying he used to eat, I don't know how many, but multiple raw eggs for breakfast every day, right? Three.
Yeah.
Feed chat knows all. Yeah,
Chat knows all.
James Buckley, three raw eggs, yes, and goat's milk.
And
So
goat's milk, yeah.
I thought it was really interesting that they're taking us all the way back to that first episode. And the fact that she doesn't eat them raw displeases him. This is the same father, however, chat, that calls her a fetid moppet. So I'm not surprised.
This is true. This is true. This is the same father calling his poor daughter I wouldn't say poor daughter because she's far from poor and far from a victim. She's done some nasty shit herself. But yes, he's you fetid moppet, which was another just hilarious insult that I will hopefully be able to use at some point in my life just naturally. I'm not going to miss that opportunity to use fetid moppet in a sentence. But yeah, I mean, the dude's just super creepy, super distant. You can definitely understand why. Again, Chad, he's super creepy, super scary. Definitely some daddy issues. He was giving Cesty vibes a little bit all city, a little bit, yeah. This was creepy. I wish you ate them raw. Yeah, I mean, that's like you're so dedicated to Kier because, of course, the raw egg thing, as James Buckley brought up, he used to eat 3 raw eggs every morning. That was his favorite food. Kier Eagan, the original Kier, and yeah, now all these years later, it's like he's trying to impart those lessons onto Helena. Like, I wish you would eat your 3 eggs raw instead of hard boiled, perfectly split down the middle the way she does them, which looked delicious, by the way. Yeah, it's. I mean, I feel like every time they show us more of Jame Egan, I'm left with even more of a creep factor, even more of like, this dude is super deranged. Like, this dude is not okay. There's something seriously wrong with him. Yet they're doing a good job of not telling us too much about Jame. They're keeping him kind of mysterious, kind of Wizard of Oz behind the curtain kind of vibes, where we don't quite know everything about him. We get a little insight into some of his motivations at the end of season 1 when he tells who he thinks is Helena, but it's really Helly at the time during the overtime contingency. He's telling her his goal is to have a whole world of people chipped. So ultimately, he wants Severance chips in every single human on the world. Why that is still remains to be seen. Does he want to gift a whole world of chipped individuals to Kier if the end result is bringing Kier back? I know a lot of people think Kier's resurrection is going to be a part of the show at some point. I'm not sure if it will or not. But yeah, I don't know. I just get super creepy vibes from Jame Egan. I mean, after seeing him in this episode, do you feel like you've gained any more insight into who he is as a character, or is it just more creep factor?
Well, I totally agree with the Sevis. Definitely, he's creepy. I mean, that goes without saying. However, with the theories that a lot of people have come up with, and I see in the chat of Cobell being his child, it really makes me think about how ironic, if it turns out to be true that Cobell is his child, how ironic that the legitimate child that he is able to recognize publicly does not do what he wants. She is not as close to Kier as he would hope. And Cobell, the illegitimate child, does everything for Kier. I mean, she generally believed in Kier, and she
Yeah.
probably does eat those eggs raw. She was a true believer, and yet she is the illegitimate child. She created Severance. And it seems to me when he mentioned that to Elena, it seemed to me that this is a pattern of always being displeased and always being disappointed. Elena can't do enough. It's always a disappointment.
Yes.
That's what it read like to me. Yeah.
It did. You're 100% right. It's one of those things where it does not matter what she does, what she accomplishes. He just doesn't seem like he will ever be pleased. Like he will ever be. I don't ever see him saying "I'm proud of you" to her. Like he just doesn't seem that kind of person, that kind of father. He doesn't seem to have that kind of empathy. And so we were talking about the empathy wing earlier, how it's maybe meant to give people empathy. Maybe it's meant to just completely take the rest of their empathy out of them. Maybe that's what the empathy wing that Miss Huang is being sent to is ultimately going to do, to kill whatever little remaining empathy is still inside of her to make her that perfect Lumen employee. I feel like that would fit a little bit more in with Lumen's goals than giving her empathy. They don't want their managers and their employees to have empathy for one another. They want them to be just the perfect workers without any kind of emotional attachment to each other, to anything else outside of this workspace. So yeah, maybe the whole empathy thing, the empathy wing that Miss Huang is being sent to, is for her to ultimately have the rest of her empathy killed off. And yeah, and as Big City, as all City brings up, what we another thing, which kind of the other thing we learned about Jame is, yeah, apparently he likes to get employees pregnant. And apparently this is something that is a recurring theme, just based on that whole Cobell scene that we saw at the end with Gemma and Devin, and the phenomenal Twilight Zone reference, which was so cool to see. That, of course, was a huge prediction of mine in episode 9, in my episode 9 prediction video. I was wondering if they were going to tie this episode into the Twilight Zone episode that is also titled The After Hours. And again, just because I knew Ben Stiller was a huge Twilight Zone fan and that it was a huge influence behind the show, I had a feeling the title was going to be in some kind of reference to that. I was definitely expecting it to be a little bit more subtle, a little bit more obscure, but it was like right there, right in your face, right on the nose. They brought up the golden thimble, they brought up Marsha's name, they brought up the 9th floor, the specialty department. They brought up every single detail from that Twilight Zone episode. So that was really cool to see. But yes, we did learn that this seems to be a regular occurrence where Jame Egan is getting employees pregnant and having these illegitimate children. And if that's the case, who knows who else is the son of Jame Egan, or who else could be an Egan out there? I know that's another thing we've seen a lot of fans talking about, what characters that we have already been introduced to, how many of them are already Egans? So a lot of people think Cobell might be the secret daughter of Jame. Some people even think that Mark is an Egan, which I suppose it could potentially be possible. I don't believe we've ever really heard a whole lot about Mark and Devin's parents. I do believe that's still left mainly and widely kind of unexplained and unanswered. I don't remember them ever speaking about their parents or talking about who their parents were or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's a possibility that we're going to find out that some of these other characters are maybe already Egans, if not Cobell, Mark, Devin, or maybe Rickon? I know there's a lot of people who think Rickon is a secret Egan. Do you think there's going to be, do you think there will at least be one secret Egan that will be revealed out of all these characters?
I think at least one. So I'm not going to say multiple because I don't believe multiple.
Yeah.
I think at least one, and I think it has something to do with Cobell. It has to, because they mentioned the relationship with her as a child, the way that he saw Kier in her. They mentioned her mother and being unable to open that room. So I think, yes, somebody's going to turn out to be an illegitimate child of James, but I don't think it's going to be Mark. I think it's going to be Cobell.
I agree. I do agree. I feel like Cobell fits the bill the best in terms of the way they set up her backstory last week's episode, what we know about her, the close connection and the close bond that her and Jame Egan had when she was younger, at the Wintertide Fellowship, her kind of inventing the Severance technology and having Jame take it from her and pass it off as his own. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if any one character is going to be a secret Egan, I think Cobell is probably the best bet. And I think that's the reason why we didn't learn anything about Cobell's father. We get this whole huge backstory on Cobell. We find out her hometown, even her old flame. I mean, we learn about her mother, her aunt. We learn about almost everything there is to know about Cobell's backstory, yet they never once touch on who her father was. And that is because I do believe her father might be Jame Egan. So yes, if any one character on the show is a secret Egan, I get the feeling it's going to be Cobell. But what do you guys think in the chat? If out of all of the characters, who do you think has the best chance of being a secret Egan? And I think Karate of Comedy got it right. It's Radar. Case solved. Case solved right there.
Yes.
You got it, Karate. No point in even discussing.
I do see that the chats were being, like, the chat is split. The Sevies don't know if they like Radar or if they don't. I did see that they kept going back and forth. They're very upset that Radar didn't bark when Drummond got into Irving's apartment, right? And other people are
True.
defending Radar, right? He's just
Yeah.
a big puppy, so he was probably terrified.
Yeah.
So I see Radar has divided the community.
Radar is dividing the chat. Oh my God, yeah. So Radar is going, Audi is going to turn against Irving. Oh my God. Yes. Wow. I didn't, I mean, you could put this on, I did not have this on my bingo card. I guess you could say that Irving's dog Radar would be the driving force in terms of dividing the chat. Are you a Irving fan, or are you a Radar fan, or are you not? Yeah, I understand when people brought that up in that episode that they were a little surprised that Radar didn't bark when Drummond entered the apartment, which I can understand that. Most dogs would, at least make some kind of noise when, some stranger is opening the door, and especially when Radar realized that this wasn't Irving, which he would have smelled right away. He would have known right away it was somebody else. Yeah, you get the sense that Radar should have at least barked, and maybe that was just an oversight on the show, something I didn't think of. Although I find that hard to believe. It feels like Severance thinks of everything, every little detail seems to be paid attention to. But I do understand people bringing up the idea that they were a little perturbed by Radar not barking. So I understand. I understand that. Miss Huang is going to be one of James, assume like Cobell, but won't remember it because they're severed. Yeah, maybe Miss Huang will get severed. Maybe she is one of James. That's very, very, very possible as well. We got Rickon. Michael Mike thinks Rickon is a secret Egan. Irving is an Egan from Steed. Ooh, interesting. Yeah, leave Radar out of it, says Interface. Yes, poor Radar. Leave poor Radar alone. Mark's mom was Fern. Yeah, we do hear her name, Fern. Could Mark's father have been Jame? I don't know, maybe, but I guess we'll have to find out. Could he be a secret Egan too? I don't know. There's something going on with Devin. I don't trust her anymore, says the quiet inside. Ooh, interesting. Not trusting Devin. And I mean, Devin was always one of those really solid characters. Like, Devin was always one of my favorite characters. And I do still like her, but I feel like when you look at Devin, she always seemed like the one kind of just normal, grounded, regular human being character in a just bizarro world where everybody else around her has some kind of weird quirk to them, or is super eccentric. It seems like almost everybody in the world of Severance is not quite normal. They've all got something. But Devin was one of the only characters that did strike me as just like your regular, down-to-earth, everyday, blue-collar working human. And she just seemed normal. Like, she gets it. But yes, a lot of people have been questioning Devin ever since she made the choice to call Cobell. People have been calling her out on that they think that's not a good idea. They think Cobell is not to be trusted. So a lot of people have been a little iffy about Devin ever since she made that call to Cobell. I still like Devin. I think Devin was in a very tough and impossible spot. I think that when you are in a spot like this where you're super desperate and family is involved, and when you're at the brink and that desperation sets in, desperation leads to foolish choices, or leads you to make choices you definitely would not usually make if you were of sound, clear head and mind. So I can understand why Devin was thinking of any possible scenario, any possibility that could maybe help her brother. But again, I can understand some fans maybe looking at Devin a little bit differently now. I can understand that. What about you? When you think of Devin, do you think she ultimately made the right choice in calling Cobell, or the wrong one?
I think it was the right choice, because what else was the choice? Ragabi left, right? It seemed like even if she didn't make the call, Ragabi wouldn't trust her. And I understand that you can't risk it, right? Because once she says that, you can't trust Devin anymore. She might call Cobell. So Ragabi left. There was no other option. There is no other choice. Mark does say, however, we told her everything. She told us nothing. I don't trust her. So he's pointing these things out to Devin, and Devin seems to really think that this is the only option. It's either this or nothing. So I do understand that from her point of view. I still trust her. I don't think that she is, a mastermind behind the machine, right? I think that that is her or Rickon's role here. I know that a lot of people have theorized that Rickon is somehow involved at a greater level with
Yeah.
Lumen, the company, but I don't see those two characters being the masterminds or even involved to that level, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see them being masterminds either. If they are involved in any kind of small way, I imagine it's going to be at the lowest capacity possible. I don't. I love the theories around Rickon, like that Rickon is secretly Kier Eagan himself. That Rickon is this big mastermind orchestrating all of this from the shadows, pretending to be this kind of new age hippie guy. While I enjoy those theories and they are kind of fun to listen to, ultimately, I think Rickon is Rickon. I don't think Rickon is some secret character that we're going to get a big reveal of at some point. Maybe we could. Maybe I'm wrong. I could totally be wrong. But I think Rickon is just Rickon. Don't take Rickon away from us. Like they're already teased taking Rickon away from us in terms of him being willing to sacrifice his views, to sacrifice everything that he preaches for this paycheck and this offer of fame and notoriety that Lumen was offering him. And even his own wife, Devin, was not too happy with it, where she looks at this and she says, this is the exact opposite of everything you believe in. So I don't want to see Rickon turn to the dark side, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Let's leave Rickon good. Let's leave Rickon and Radar good. Radar is too good. Radar is way too good. I'm glad we have a lot of Radar fans. I'm a huge dog fan myself. Absolutely. Absolutely. Severing dogs would be severing dogs would be horrible. I think. I mean, why sever a poor dog like that? It would be a little messed up. I think. Radar is divided. Everyone loves Radar. Burt, Cobell, Drummond. Radar was standing at attention when Irv walked in, pointing at the problem. He was on the job. He was a little bit. Yeah. Awesome stuff. It's Devin who has the blue eyes. Yeah. I mean. Yeah, maybe Devin has the Egan blue eyes, if that's what you're referring to, that Egan blue eye look that a lot of them do have. Yeah, maybe. Didn't Devin used to have a baby? What happened to the baby? That baby's an Egan. Everybody's an Egan. You're an Egan, and you're an Egan, and you're an Egan. We need an episode of Maury Povich at this point. But yes, Devin does have a baby. I know we haven't seen the baby in a while, right? Like I can't remember the last time we've seen the baby, and it's unfortunate we got like no Rickon scenes this season. I'm just kind of noticing that right now. We've got like no Rickon this season. That's such a travesty. My God.
And that's probably where he is. Okay, the baby has two parents, so while she's off having adventures, I do see the chat is saying, where is the baby? She is having adventures. She's not being a very mindful mother. The baby has two parents, and so Rickon is taking care of the baby. That's probably where he's at. So the baby's taken care of, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. I'm sure the baby's fine, and I tend to agree with you. And that's why we haven't seen so much Rickon. He's just consumed with taking care of the child. A newborn is a handful from what I hear. Yeah, it's a little disappointing. I do wish we could have seen a little bit more Rickon. He is one of the more fun characters. He's a very interesting character, and I feel like they could have used a little more of Rickon just narratively speaking, considering season 2 is really heavy. Like it's really dark in some places. They go into some very serious topics and very serious situations where you would think they would like to have a little more levity in a season like this. Like the levity and the serious shit was balanced pretty well in season 1. We got a good mix of both. But in season 2, it's been like dark compared to season one. They're really diving into a lot of these serious and real world topics. So you would have thought that season two would have been the season that they need even more levity from a character like a Rickon, or a little bit of levity we get from Mark every once in a while when he says something stupid and funny. But yeah, I guess I was just a little bit disappointed we didn't get to see a whole lot of Rickon this season. I'm a Rickon fan, I must say. We are proud members of the cult of Rickon here.
Yes, we are. But that is still to be decided, because while they told us that he's going to be rewriting the book, we haven't seen anything. They were Severance, Apple TV was doing something really cool where they were giving the fans access to like the book, the original Rickon book. So when they mentioned that he was rewriting it, I thought, well, maybe they're going to put up the new book on the Apple Books. And
Yes.
I have been waiting. They haven't done that. So I'm kind of disappointed, and I hope that in the finale we at least get like a tiny glimpse at what Rickon has been up to, because he is kind of one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, he's a very interesting one. He's one I'd like to see. Rick, I like to see Rickon on screen. It's always a little bit. It's always fun with him. It's always fun with him. But this is another interesting one. We had some interesting Dylan scenes in this episode, and I've already seen a few comments from our pregame stream, and on either my latest video, I think some people put some down as well, where they felt bad for Dylan in this episode. They went away from this episode kind of really feeling for Dylan, Innie and Audi, and that's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. I feel like, one thing, it was interesting for her to come clean, for one. She did it kind of super early on. She comes clean to her husband, Audi Dylan, and tells him, I've been lying to you. I've really been seeing Innie Dylan, and we kissed. And of course, Audi Dylan does not take that the best of ways. He refers to it as, using my own body to cheat on me kind of thing, because even though it was him, it wasn't him at the same time. Innies and Audis are two different people that are sharing a body, is how I kind of look at it. So I would kind of consider this cheating if I was in Dylan's shoes and Gretchen was my wife. I would definitely consider it cheating. I mean, and I think Fields brings up some interesting points in terms of innies and outies both deserving love, both deserving to have their own life, kind of thing. So it is cheating in a sense. I do believe that. But this was interesting to see, kind of, again, I used to feel a little bit bad for Gretchen anytime they used to show scenes of Gretchen and Audi Dylan in their real world, in their home world, where you always kind of saw Audi Dylan just was never quite up to the task. He was always kind of messing something up, couldn't get food right. Like he wasn't very efficient. And you kind of always felt a little bit bad for Gretchen because of it. And you totally understood why Gretchen was gravitating towards Innie Dylan so much. And she even says it in this episode. She voices it. He reminds me of who you used to be. And apparently, Audi Dylan used to be a little closer to Innie Dylan, where he was a little bit more driven. He did have his head on his shoulders a little bit tighter. And, she was just naturally feeling a connection to Innie Dylan because he reminded her of him, back in the day. But what did you guys think about this episode in the chat? Did you guys feel bad for Dylan, Audi Dylan? Did you guys feel bad for Innie Dylan? What about you as well, PM? Because, of course, we do also see poor Innie Dylan getting down on one knee to ask Gretchen to marry him and say, I can give you a life. I can make you happy. And he made her a little paper ring and everything. It was super cute. It was super funny. What did you think of this episode, guys? Did you come away from these scenes or this episode feeling a little bit bad for Dylan, and which Dylan did you feel worse for? Like, for me, this broke my heart for Innie Dylan.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much here, right? Like, this is such a complicated relationship. There's a lot. Okay, so for Audi Dylan, I see interface. Interface, you could always count on him to uh, give us, play devil's advocate. So he made an excellent comment about why Audi Dylan shouldn't be upset. However, I do understand Audi Dylan being upset, because when he says, using my own body to cheat on me.
Yes.
that is how it feels like to him. So while Gretchen is going through all of this stuff, for him, it feels like my own body was used without my consent to cheat on me because you think I'm a better version of myself when I'm severed. He then walks out of the door and he says, I'm going to go to work to make money to feed our children, which is powerful. However, you have to remember you're severed. You're not doing the work. Who's doing the work is Innie. So in reality, Innie is going to work to feed your children. It's all of the
Yes.
work that Innie Dylan is doing that feeds the kids and pays the bills. So he can't really claim that for himself. Now, Innie Dylan, I found the choice of words to be very powerful because he says,
Yeah.
even though I'm an innie, I love you all the way. So, like, I know I'm
Yeah.
half of a person, but I love you as much as any person would, right? And then he says, I can give you a life, which is very ironic because when it comes to innies, one of their big struggles is that they don't have a life, that their life only exists between the hours of 9 to 5. So the fact that he promises, I can give you a life, I wondered, what do you mean? Because you can't really, you cannot promise her that you could give her a life. You could give
Yeah.
her like 2 minutes of your time, or like 15 minutes when Miss Huang authorizes it. But I did feel bad with the paper ring. It just
I know.
it was-
I did feel so bad for him, because the innies do still kind of portray themselves like they are still these kind of children, and it does. I mean, you feel bad for Dylan in this moment, even though this is never something that can work, even though he's so committed to it. Just like Irving at the end of the episode, I'm ready. I'm ready for this. I'm ready for this. You kind of got that same vibe here from Dylan, where he thinks he's ready for this. He thinks that he can give her this life, but in actuality, he can't. He can never leave this place. He can never go home with her at night. He can never spend his life with her, unfortunately. He can't take care of her in that way. So you felt a little bit bad for Dylan in this scene, or at least I did. I mean, I felt for the guy. And I thought it was super, I mean, making the little paper ring and everything, it's like, poor guy, man. How can you not feel bad for him after that? I mean, just crazy, absolutely crazy. And we got Duce Falco for $50. Wow, thank you so much, Falco. That's incredibly generous of you. PM is fantastic. That's all.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I 150% agree with you. She is the best co-host in the world, and she's got some of the best takes. So this is why I love streaming with her. This is why I love streaming with you guys in the chat. You guys have some of the best takes that I've ever heard on these characters, on these shows, and everything. And yes, I am super grateful for my awesome, wonderful co-host PM, who always brings a very interesting and unique perspective to all of these scenes. So thank you so much for that, Falco, and thank you
No,
so much
thank
again,
you.
PM, for being the awesome co-host you are. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, super generous. Super generous. Thank you very much. And I wholeheartedly agree. PM is fantastic. Fantastic. Do you think any Dylan deserves some action someone like Mark and Cobell had? Interesting. I don't know. I guess the big question going forward now is, does Gretchen ever return? Does Gretchen ever visit Innie Dylan again? Because she did kind of leave under the emphasis of telling him, I can't come back here anymore. I can't return to here anymore. Like, it's jeopardizing her marriage. She's feeling these feelings. She's better, probably getting stronger and stronger for her. So I guess that's the question going forward. What do you guys think in the chat? And what do you think as well, PM? Do you think we will see Gretchen visit Dylan again?
I mean, it's really difficult because she already spoke to her husband about this. So
Yeah.
if she visits again, she would have to be making a conscious choice to lie to him or to have him risk any Dylan. He said, I might just quit. That would be the end of any Dylan. So if she visits again, that's making a conscious choice to cheat on her husband. While at the beginning, maybe it wasn't that. Maybe she just wanted to make sure that he didn't lose this job because they needed the job to support the family. At this point, if she visits again, I think it's with more malice, if you will. It's knowing that her husband does not feel good about it and that she's risking any Dylan's life. Do I think that she will do it? I don't think so, because you don't say it if you're going to continue to do it, right? That's just kind of my approach to it. Like, you don't say it if you're going to continue to see him. If you said it, it's because you're ready to end the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it did have a little bit of that finality to it, and as people also bring up in the chat, I mean, she might not even have a chance to go see him if Dylan does quit. I mean, we know that Denny's Ilyn has put up the request to quit, but ultimately, unfortunately, it's not up to him. It's not up to him whether he doesn't have the ability to quit. It is not his choice. It's the Audi's choice. He can put that request in to his Audi, but it's up to the Audi to either accept or deny that request of ending this job. So ultimately, it is Audi Dylan's choice to quit and end the existence of any Dylan, or to continue going to work. So I guess that's another interesting question to see how that is all going to play out. Will Audi Dylan ever return to Lumon? Will he really quit and just end any Irving's existence, as to give himself a little bit of peace of mind, to, so he doesn't ever have to worry when or if his wife is seeing any Dylan behind his back and not telling him? Yeah, I mean, that's going to be interesting to see. Will he ultimately quit or not? I don't know. It's yeah, it's an interesting one. If the writers don't want us to completely hate Gretchen, she can't go back, and that's an interesting point too, as well, Lisi. Because I mean, I think Gretchen has been a pretty likable character up until this point, up until this episode. Maybe people have shifted a little bit on her, which is understandable. But I feel like for the most part, she's been a pretty likable character. I haven't seen a whole lot of hate get thrown in Gretchen's direction from any fans up until this point. But yes, if she does kind of just go back after all of this, it will paint her in a little bit more of a selfish light, in a little bit more of a light where she's actively, really crossing the line. Where at first she was kind of innocently crossing the line, now it's like blatant in Audi Dylan's face. So yeah, if she does return, I imagine she's probably not going to be a big fan favorite after that. That's a good point. That's a good point.
And we do need an I'm gonna kill her, Mr. Milchick, for our super chat.
We do. We know. Oh my God, we need more than that. We need a I'm a killer, Mr. Milkshake. We need a do it, Seth. We need
marshmallows.
We need marshmallows. We need them all.
Yes! Do it, Seth! Irving, stop this! She's a fucking mole!
What are you doing?
I'm gonna kill her, Mr. Milchick!
Marshmallows are for team players, Dylan. They don't just hand them out.
Marshmallows are for team players, Dylan. They don't just hand them out. Yes, we owe that at the very least to our pal Falco for that incredible gifted memberships and the incredible super chat. So generous, just so freaking generous. Again, I love this chat. I love hanging out with you guys, diving into these shows, diving into these topics. It's always a ton of fun. Absolute ton of fun. Gretchen basically caused Dylan to unalive himself. I mean, if he does go that route, yeah, I mean, any Dylan, if you're talking about any Dylan wanting to retire, wanting to quit, then yes, you're actually 100% right there. Gretchen was directly responsible for any Dylan wanting to resign, wanting to put this request into his Audi. Because again, we're seeing the kind of pattern continue, the pattern repeat that we saw with Irving. This is exactly what we saw with Irving at the end of season 2, at the end of season 1, and the beginning of season 2, where Irving was so hurt. He was so devastated at the thought of never being able to see Burt again. He just wanted the pain to end. He just wanted it to be over. And now we're seeing Dylan go down that exact same road, where after Gretchen denied him and unfortunately did not say yes to marry him. Now Dylan is in a very similar state of mind where it seems like he just wants the pain to end. He just wants it to be over. He wants to quit, essentially unaliving himself, as you say, Christine Jellybean. So yes, Gretchen was directly responsible for any Dylan to potentially try to at least commit severance seppuku, as if you will. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. And it's a heartbreak. I mean, this is, any Dylan. I feel like one thing we've learned about him in season one was he was kind of this kind of class clown kind of character. You never took him too seriously. And then as soon as he found out that he had a family on the outside, that completely changed Dylan, where we started to see a little bit more of a serious Dylan, a little bit more of a Dylan that kind of wanted to understand a little bit more, wanted to feel a little bit more, to the point where we get to season 2 and he's having these meetings with his Audi's wife, and he's completely fallen in love with her at this point. Like, this is the one thing we hear Dylan say to Helly in this episode earlier as well, where, they're out there and we're still stuck down here with no lives and no family. And knowing that Dylan has that family on the outside, even if it's not his family and it's his Audi's family, he knows that there's that family that is out there that he's connected to. And he knows that he's never going to be able to spend time with them. He's never going to be able to see these children grow up. And in this episode, I feel like it really just hits him. It really hits him where he felt like maybe he was super close to having that family he always wanted, and it was ripped away from him the second Gretchen said no. So yeah, you can totally see why Dylan kind of wanted to just end it. He wanted to end the pain.
And he says it. He very powerful line. He says to Gretchen, "I only have this and pencil erasers." So he kind of merges the two Dylans that we know, the Dylan that was all about the perks with the new Dylan who is all about his family and Gretchen and hearing about the children. I only have this and pencil erasers. That's it. I also found it super funny that at the beginning when Gretchen says, I told my husband, the Audi Dylan, he says, is he happy for us? It's like, of course he's not.
Of course he's not happy for you. I know.
Like, is he glad for us?
I totally forgot. I totally forgot about that. Yes.
It's such a Dylan thing. Such a Dylan idea to have. Is he happy for us? Of course not.
My God, I totally forgot about that scene. Yes. Is he happy for us? No, he's not happy for you. Like, what are you thinking? And that just points to the kind of, the oblivious innocence of kind of Innie Dylan. He's like super innocent, super kind of, untainted by the darkness of the world and how something like that might be perceived. He's just so untainted by all of this craziness, and he's still so kind of innocent. But yeah, I totally forgot. That was such a hilarious scene. Is he happy for us? He should be happy for us. I make you happy.
Oh yeah, he said that. I make you happy is like, no.
Oh, not happy. Quite the opposite, I'm afraid. Quite the opposite. Good stuff, guys. Good stuff. Let's see what else we got. Does Milkshake bring all the boys to the yard? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Never know. I used that marshmallow line at a staff message one day. It's a great line. Anybody, if you ever have a chance to use any of these Severance lines, like in the real world, and you get the opportunity where it kind of just naturally fits into the conversation, by all means, use it every chance you get. I know I certainly do. If I ever have a chance to say marshmallows are for team players, Dylan, or anybody else's name, they don't just give them away, I am not going to pass that opportunity up. I am not going to miss the opportunity to drop a Milkshake line if I have a chance, for sure.
It doesn't have to fit. So Jeremy says, use it if it fits. It doesn't have to fit, Sevi.
Doesn't have to.
You could be at the grocery store and the line at Trader Joe's to scream, I'm a Mr. Milkshake.
Yes, do it, Sith. You might not need the context. You might just be able to do it. The grocery store would actually be a perfect place to say all of these lines, so especially like marshmallows. You know what I mean? Say you're shopping with your family, and one of your family members wants marshmallows, and you say, "Hey, marshmallows are for team players, kid." And they don't just give them out, and you keep walking. Like, you can use this stuff. It can be used, for sure. For sure. Probably the darkest episode. I mean, it was a dark episode. I mean, I feel like it wasn't like, I don't know if it was the darkest. I feel like Severance has gone into some dark moments this season. But I do feel like that is the theme overall, though, for season two. Like, season two's theme was, okay, we're getting darker. We're getting a little bit more serious, which, of course, lines up with what Dan Erickson said about season one being about their childhood and season two being about them growing into adolescence. We're definitely seeing that portrayed here for sure. Absolutely. Wait, was Dylan sent to the testing floor? No, I don't think he was sent to the testing floor. I think he was sent home. After Innie Dylan comes up and he makes his request to quit his job, he writes out the request, and that request gets handed to the Audi, and it's ultimately the Audi's choice if they want to listen to the innie's request or ignore it, like what happened with Helly in season one, where Helena just completely ignored it and said, if you dare touch my freaking fingers, I will make you wish for death or some crazy shit. So no, I don't think that was not them sending Dylan to the testing floor. It looked like they were just sending him home into the regular elevator. At least that's kind of how I saw it. I don't think that was testing floor material. Why is it considered their death? They're not dying at all. They just don't come back to work. Am I missing something? Well, if they don't come back to work, they don't exist. The innies only exist at work. That's the whole thing with an innie and an Audi. If the Audi quits and the Audi never comes back to work, then the innie never gets activated again. That's it. The innie's just gone. I mean, yes, it's always possible if they ever rejoin the job or if they ever find a way to kind of do the switch, maybe the innie can come back. But if an Audi quits their job, the innie does essentially die because the innie will never be brought back ever again. The innies only exist inside the office. So if they quit and the Audi just goes on living their life and never switches back to the innie, that is essentially the death of the innie. They're no more. They're never going to see or be active ever again. And I think that's why they kind of refer to it as death on the show, where even in season one, when Burt was retiring, we saw why Irving was so sad, because he knew that he was never going to be able to see Burt again, that Innie Burt was never going to return. And he even says, you're all just going to stand there while he kills himself, while he dies. So the innies very much view being shut off permanently as a form of death, in a sense, because in a sense it is their death. It's them never being activated ever again while the Audi goes on to live the rest of their life on the outside world, and the innie is forever locked away, never active, just, again, essentially kind of dead. And I think that's why they refer to it as an innie death, because they're gone at that point. The innies will never see the outside world. The innies don't get to go outside of Lumen. They only exist on the Severance floor. And if the Audi is never returning to the Severance floor ever again, then the innie will never be activated ever again. So it is essentially a death, I guess. I understand why they talk about it in that, the finality of the context of it, for sure. For sure. Yeah, Dylan went up to the lobby. Yeah, it looked like Dylan went up to the lobby, into the regular elevator, back up to the lobby, had to switch probably to Audi Dylan, where he was probably greeted with the note from Innie Dylan, and now it's up to Audi. It's up to Audi Dylan to decide, am I going to quit? Am I going to listen to my Innie and quit? Or am I going to keep this job? I mean, we have heard some of Audi Dylan's traits, how they're not always the best. He kind of has trouble keeping a good job. He's always moving from job to job and kind of idea to idea, nothing ever quite really fitting for him. But if he has this steady, well-paying job on the Severance floor, I mean, he should keep it just for stability's sake. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen after he sees the message that Innie Dylan left for him? You think Audi Dylan will ever come back to work?
I think that he has to. With what we know about their lifestyle and what Gretchen has expressed, the fact that we saw her in her uniform. It's like 911 paramedic. She works nights. It seems like they need the money. When we saw their vehicle, they don't drive like the nicest car. They don't live in the nicest place. So it seemed from what she has told us, if we put that all together with their lifestyle, it seems like this is not something that he could just afford to give up. He can't just afford to quit, right? And I don't think that Gretchen would want him to. We saw him at the interview for the door job. Do you recall that? Where he went and to
Yeah.
interview immediately after he was let go.
Yeah.
And he really needed the job, right? He
Yeah.
really needed the job. So it makes me think that no, like there's no way that he's just gonna quit unless he's super irresponsible. We do know that Gretchen has said that he is. So I suppose it could be 50% at this point.
It could be. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not 100% sure if he's going to return or not. But part of me thinks he will. Part of me thinks he ultimately will return to this job. And I feel like him threatening to quit was almost a form of punishment for Innie Dillon, end his existence. That's what he said. I'll just quit and end his existence. But once he sees that Innie Dillon wants him to do that, he might be less inclined to do it now. He might be less inclined to give Innie Dillon what he wants. And kind of keep him going, so he has to keep experiencing this kind of pain. Maybe there is a little factor there where he just doesn't want to give Innie Dillon what he wants, even if what he originally wanted and what Innie Dillon want are now the same thing. It could change his mind a little bit there, maybe. I guess we'll see. And yes, they're dead until they all become Manchurian candidates and do the Egan's bidding. That's what I'm super worried about, BTVS. And I wouldn't be too surprised if there's something along those lines happening. I feel like the way Jame Egan talks about it at the end of season 1, where him telling Helly that the ultimate goal of Lumon, his ultimate dream is to see everybody on the entire planet chipped. He wants everybody to have a severance chip inside their brain. And I have to imagine that isn't just because he wants everyone to be a severed employee. There's not enough employment jobs to sever the entire world. That's why I do believe they're going to start offering these severance chips in many other forms and functions, whether it's cosmetic. We've seen that it's already been utilized in birthing, where you have an innie just for giving birth. I wouldn't be surprised if it's used for procedures, operations, stuff like this. I wouldn't be surprised if they completely just roll out the severance technology at one point and make it available for multiple different uses that humans go through that maybe they don't want to go through themselves. And maybe that is the ultimate goal, to finally get everybody chipped. And once everybody is chipped, why do you want that? What was the end game? What are these chips going to do besides switch from innie to outie? What else are these chips capable of, I guess, is the question at the end of the day. And that's why I've kind of always wondered if something like this might potentially be a possibility, where that's why Jame Egan wants everybody on the world chipped, because at some point these chips are going to be used for some other form of technology. A Manchurian candidate kind of way is super scary to think of, but it could totally be possible. Could totally be possible as well. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like these.
One thing that I really want to talk to you about, because as soon as I saw it, I thought, okay, we need to know what Jeremy thinks about this, is they focused in on the Lumon water tower, and they made sure to really focus in on it. I know that, the Lumon brand is the water drop logo because of ether. But when they focus in on the water tower, it made me think they're putting something in the water. Like it has to be. They're poisoning the people. They're putting something in the water. They control the water tower. So there has to be some sort of like chemical going into the water to potentially already control the population.
Maybe. That's actually a really good point. I mean, we've always been wondering why this water tower is super prevalent. We see it in so many scenes. They're always showing it. We see the Lumon logo on it all the time. Yeah, could they potentially, is this something that they have been laying the groundwork for a lot of time, where they're contaminating the very water that goes to the residents of Kier for some kind of nefarious reason? I could totally see them doing that. That's super, super creepy, super scary to think they would do something like that. But I think I would not put that past them, for a second. I would not put that past Lumon for a second. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. Man, yeah. What if the Severance chips were a microscopic colony of nanobots? Jame would rule the world. And again, like, who knows? That's what I'm saying. I get the feeling that these Severance chips, it's going to get revealed at some point that that something is going on. There's something more going on here. I don't think that these chips are only going to be used for the Severance program of creating innies and outies. I would be super surprised if there isn't some other nefarious kind of means that this technology is going to be used for. You have a technology this sophisticated, this advanced, this proprietary, and you have all of the, the biggest geniuses in the world working on said technology 24/7. Naturally, they are going to look for other ways to use this technology. They're going to try and utilize it for other functions. So, yeah, I will be super surprised if the Severance chip is only used to create employees. I get the feeling we're going to see that this chip has multiple other functions.
And we have already seen it. So there is precedent for this idea. We saw it at the birthing cabin, which is where we're located at now, right? In this episode, they used Severance in order to have somebody go through the birthing experience, to the point where the innie woman who was giving birth didn't even know the name that the child would actually end up with. She had an entire different name and an entire different life that she thought she was going to live with this child. So Pam Jam, one of our sevies, right? Whenever you guys have idea sevies, if we love them, we remember them, and we try to put them out there. Pam Jam, her theory is one of my favorite ones. It's the theory where she says that Severance will be used as a form of anesthesia, a way to make somebody go through any experience that becomes uncomfortable for you. You just simply are severed for the experience, like Gemma. So Gemma has multiple innies, right? And so this means if you go to the dentist, you would have an innie. If you go to give birth, you would have another innie that handles that specific situation. And so you will be severed for anything that is uncomfortable or anything that can alter your tempers, anything that can make you feel woe, malice, pain. I really love that theory, and I think that this is eventually where we're going.
I love that theory too. I do. I think I think it fits so perfectly, and I do think the whole pregnancy, the way that they're utilizing the Severance chip for pregnancy is a perfect kind of foreshadowing for what Pam Jam laid out there, for it to just become a regular, everyday kind of, just like you mentioned, an anesthesia. Instead of going and being put under, you can have the option of being severed for your procedure. You could have your option of being severed for this surgery. So I love that theory from Pam Jam, and I do think that is ultimately where this is going. I'll be so surprised if they're only using these Severance chips just to create employees. There's no way that they're putting Gemma through all that torture and agony just to create a better, more perfect employee. They're doing it because they want to test the limits of these Severance chips. And we even hear them talking about part of the research is seeing what transcends the Severance barrier. And if you're and we even see them, we see them putting Gemma through very painful dental procedures to see, does she remember, does she feel the pain from one persona to the other? So I do feel like we are getting good foreshadowing for exactly that, for them to eventually lay out the Severance program and just make it available to the wider general audience, make it available to the entire public for almost any reason they want, a procedure, a dental appointment, a surgery, anything like that, a pregnancy, all of that stuff. So I do love that. I love that theory, and I would be not surprised in the slightest if that's where this was going. For sure. For sure. I feel when Mark called Milchick could hear the balance in Mark's voice when he stopped being over sarcastic and said, "I'm not sick, I just needed a day, okay? It's just work, right?" Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty interesting conversation between Mark and Milchick there at the end, where Milchick is, he's trying to coax him back to work. He's trying to talk to him and get him back into the office because he's already catching flack from Drummond for him not being here. But again, I also do really enjoy Milchick standing up to Drummond and kind of, spitting some truth. Like, hey, it's not up to me what Audi Mark does. I can't control whether or not he comes to work. I can only control what any Mark does when he's at work. What Audi Mark does, whether he comes to work or not, that's on you, Drummond. So again, I love that scene. That was probably my favorite scene of the episode. That and the Burt and Irving stuff was pretty good as well. But I guess that'll be my question for you, PM, and for all of you guys in the chat as well. What was your favorite scene from the episode? Or even if you didn't have one particular favorite scene, what storyline did you like the best? Milchick's, Dylan's, Mark's, Cobell's? Like, what scene did you guys enjoy the most? Or what storyline did you enjoy the most? Do you have a favorite scene, PM?
This is a really difficult question.
It is.
Because
it's a good one.
Every single one of the stories are so complex and could make for my favorite. Really, when we look at the Dylan and his wife's relationship storyline, that's a very complex storyline that examines like being your better self, right? When somebody falls in love with you, they fall in love with you at your best. I suppose when you get to know somebody, right, you present the best version of yourself. But over time, some people change. And like Interface was saying, can you be upset about it? Should you be upset about it? How do you handle it? So I love the complexity of that. However, for the future, for what we need to get to, right? We need to get to the end game. Like, what is happening? What is the whole point? I think that the Irving and Burt storyline is the most helpful because we were able to see that feelings, romantic feelings, love transcends the severance barrier. And so now that we know that love transcends the severance barrier, that gives us some hope for Gemma and Mark. Gemma has been saying that she doesn't remember, and I believe that she's lying because every time she says, I don't remember anything in the hallway, she asks about Mark. When can I see Mark? Will I be able to see Mark?
Yeah.
So it's almost like I'm going to give you the answer that you want in order for me to get what I want. And what I want is to see my husband. If Irving and Burt's storyline shows us that the barrier, the severance barrier, is transcended by love, then it gives us an opportunity for Mark and Gemma to indeed have a happy ending, to get to know, to see each other and to recognize, right, the relationship that they have. And it gives us an opportunity to pull Gemma back from the abyss, really. Because right now, what Cobell stated, that if Cold Harbor is completed, we know it's at 96%, she will be dead. We're really like working against the clock to pull her back from this abyss.
We are. I mean, and I feel like it got even more urgent tonight with Cobell's, like you said, with Cobell's line. Everything we hear from Cobell, I see someone in the chat. Cobell always steals the scenes, and she does. I mean, Patricia Arquette is a phenomenal actress. She's great in this role. And yeah, we see her bring up the very real possibility that if Cold Harbor is completed to 100%, that it could mean Gemma's death. Gemma could be completely lost at that point. And does that mean her physical death, or does that mean a little more along the lines as to what a lot of us have been thinking is going to happen all season, that once 100% is reached, that Gemma will be no more and only Miss Casey will be left? What exactly constitutes the death of Gemma? The death of her personality, the death of all of her severed personas, or her actual physical death, where her body actually dies? What is that death ultimately a definition of? But yeah, Cobell steals the scenes. The Gretchen scene was a favorite from Mike. Interface says Milchick clapping back was top tier. He's one of the most interesting characters, and he finally talked back to his superiors. That was the most satisfying scene. Like, for me, that was definitely the most satisfying scene to see. I would say that was probably my favorite as well. Finally seeing Milchick do what I've wanted him to do for 2 seasons now. Step up and just not take their shit anymore. And I love that he did it in such epic fashion. I do think, again, he's still got a long ways to go before he fully realizes and gets the hooks of Lumon out of him. I don't think this one encounter between him and Drummond is all of a sudden going to make Milchick realize that Lumon is evil. I think it's going to take a little bit more, but I do think this was a great first step. It was nice to see him finally stepping up to Lumon and just kind of throwing it right back in their face. Love that. Love that. This episode was wild. And another one, Milchick finally telling Drummond to back off. Awesome. Miss Huang really seemed like a child for the first time. I felt bad for her, especially knowing what Harmony went through as a kid. And that's another interesting point. And you mentioned something very similar to this as well, where we do see a little bit of a different kind of mini Milkshake in this episode, where even that one screenshot that you were showing, where it's that nice little close-up, you do get a sense that it's like, she was always super robotic, no? Like, she was super robotic, super stern, super kind of strict. But yes, in this episode, you did get a sense that this is actually still a child. I mean, she might be kind of indoctrinated, she might be a little brainwashed, but at the end of the day, this is still a child, an innocent child that was taken at a super young age and molded into what she is now, to the point where she doesn't even have empathy for the innies to throw a funeral for Irving. She's, you shouldn't let them throw a funeral. It makes them feel human. So no, I agree with you and PM both on this, where this episode finally portrayed Miss Huang as an actual child, an actual human who has been through probably some pretty dark stuff, just like Harmony went through as a kid as well, which is another reason why I really enjoyed last week's episode. That gives us this, these character development moments where we get to see exactly what Cobell went through, and through her, we get an idea of what all of these Wintertide attendees are going through. Miss Huang is just the latest in probably a long line of Cobells. And yeah, you got to see the human behind Miss Huang in this episode, the child, not just the employee.
Yeah, and when you see her with her little earmuffs, she looks like such a baby, such a little child, right?
Yeah.
And when she is given the news that she has passed, right, the internship, she's not happy. She's actually quite upset. She says, I thought I was going to finish the time here. So you could see that even though she is in this program, she's hesitant about what the program means for her and where they're taking her. And she looked terrified. While she's waiting for this bus here in that screenshot, she just looks like a terrified child. She doesn't get to see her parents. She doesn't get to communicate with anybody that would care for her, genuinely care for her, before she's about to embark on this new journey. So I totally agree. I feel so bad for Mini Milkshake. But Lacey makes an excellent comment about Mr. Milkshake. Now that he's demanding respect, she says she's going to try to not call him Mr. Milkshake, right? That in itself is disrespectful. But we need to give him his respect. So we need to go back to Milchick.
Okay, I like that. I like that. That's good. That's not bad. I love the Milkshake name, but yeah, I mean, I feel like Milkshake was the kind of the Lumon employee, where he's getting back to Milchick now. So I can understand that. I think that's a good one. Yeah. That's a good one. And it seems like that was a lot of people's favorite scene tonight, too. A lot of people are bringing up the Milchick scene. We got another one. Yes, Milchick standing up for himself was powerful. Favorite scene was the Milchick and Drummond. Like, it really was such a powerful scene to finally see him kind of stand up to, this entity. And again, for him to stand up to Drummond in particular, the most physically imposing character on the show, super high up on Lumen, super imposing. You get the sense that nobody ever wants to cross this guy. And Milchick said, screw you. He looked right in his face, stepped right up to him and said, I love that too. Devour feculence. And even Drummond had no idea what he was talking about. I love how Milchick kind of has to explain it to him afterwards. It just felt like Milchick was finding himself again. Because, again, a huge part of Milchick's identity is his very sophisticated vocabulary. That's one of the parts of his character that I love the most. I love how he's always saying these words where sometimes I myself have to look up the word to see what the hell it even means. Yeah, I mean, it just felt like it was Milchick remembering who he was. Like, no, I'm fucking Milchick. I'm Seth Milchick. Shit, show me some respect. So it was a powerful scene. It was a good scene.
It was an excellent scene, but I thought it was quite ironic because he demands respect and work-life balance. When Mark is calling him on the phone, he's looking at that painting of the iceberg and realizing that he does not have work-life balance. Even though he's not severed, he himself gets to keep his memories, like the innies have stated before. You get to keep your memories. He doesn't have work-life balance. Everything is work. So he doesn't have that persona outside of work. We see him doing things for Lumen on his off time, for Elena and for the innies. I thought it was very ironic that it's after he pushes Mini Milkshake into growing and ascending up the company that he finally says, this is enough. I'm not doing this. And he tells Mark, it's fine. Just, tell me, can you promise me that you'll be here tomorrow? So it's making me hopeful, maybe, that he will potentially help Mini Milkshake get out of this program that he's shipping her off to. Because when he did that was before Drummond spoke to him this way. That was before we see him kind of say, this is enough. You've done enough. You have treated me badly, and I'm not going to stand for it. In the podcast, because there is a Severance podcast, they have talked about Milchick's character and the way that Lumen views him. And they specifically said verbatim, Lumen views him as less than. So this is right from Ben Stiller and the creator. They said that is the way that Lumen views Mr. Milkshake, as less than. And so it made me really proud of him. And I know that he's doing horrible things, guys, because I see it in the chat. That's true. He knows all about Gemma. He knows what they're doing to her. But it made me just a tiny bit proud for him to stand up and to say, like, no, like, enough is enough. I'm doing the job. This is the job. And that's it. I'm not going to do anything more. No more after hours, if you will.
Yes. It did have a little bit of that kind of sense of declaration. You're right. I 100% agree. Because, like you said, we see Milchick just completely devoting all of his time to Lumen and to the Eagans. Not just while he's on the clock, but like you mentioned, off the clock too, to super late hours into the night by the looks of it. He has done so much. He has sacrificed and given so much for this company. And yes, this did kind of almost seem like it was one of those declarations of, I'm in charge of the Severance from now on. What happens on the off hours is not my responsibility. And again, he stood up for himself. And I do, it was a good scene. It was a powerful scene. And I would also love to see this as well, as Christine Jellybean says, I want to see a Milchick background episode. I would love to see that myself as well. I love how we got the Cobell background episode. And part of me has always wondered, we have seen that there is this Myrtle Egan School for Girls where they take very young girls at a very young age, whether it's child labor, kind of indoctrinating them. We see that they have this whole system to recruit very young girls, unfortunately. And I always wondered if Lumen had the male equivalent of that. Like if Lumen has some kind of, the Baird Egan School for Boys or whatever it might be called. And maybe Milchick also went through a fellowship program like Miss Huang is going through. Maybe that's why Milchick, it's been so hard for him to completely sever, in lack of better terms, his ties to Lumen, because he has also been indoctrinated ever since he was a child as well. So I do hope we get a background episode on Milchick at some point in season 3 as well, because I think it'll give us some very interesting insights. And yeah, again, part of me has always wondered if there is a male equivalent school, just like Cobell and Miss Huang have went through. I imagine there has to be. Like, I imagine if you're Lumen, you're going to be recruiting, young boys and young girls for these programs to get as many workers, loyal workers as you can. So I wouldn't be too surprised if we see, hopefully, maybe some kind of Milchick backstory, and we find out that he also went to a similar school like the Myrtle Egan School for Girls. You think there's a male equivalent to that school for young boy recruits?
I think that you make an excellent point. There is no reason for them to stop at just girls.
Yeah.
There is no reason to not, if what you're looking for is the perfect employee, and to really, they said a chip for everybody in the world, that includes young boys. So there is no reason for them not to have one. Interface makes an excellent, hilarious comment to the dedication that Mr. Milchick has. The man's delivering pineapples on a bike at midnight.
Oh my God.
And they're like huge arrangements too. It's like, how did he fit them into the bike?
Oh my God, that is so true. It's like, if that's not a sign of dedication, if that's not a sign of commitment, then I don't know what is. So that is perfect internet face. Yeah, man's delivering pineapples on a bike at midnight. That is dedication. Yeah, never not working. Like, that is super dedicated. That is 100% correct. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, everyone else drives a jalopy. Milchick has a cool arse bike. He does. Yeah, he's got the badass street bike. His bike was pretty cool, for sure. For sure. But yeah, I would like to see that. I would definitely like to see that at some point, where we get a nice Milchick background story episode similar to the Cobell one. But yeah, that man's delivering pineapples on a bike at midnight. Oh, I love that. I love that. It's so good. It's so good.
That's dedication. Sevis in the chat, would you deliver pineapples at midnight on a bike if your job asked you to? Would you say, yes, I'm totally up for it? Or would it be like, no, this is my off hours. These are my after hours. I'm not doing that.
Yeah. My first question would be, am I getting time and a half for this? Then maybe I'll decide. Am I getting time and a half for this? Then maybe I'll deliver your pineapples on my sketchy bike with this, yeah, super weird thing to deliver via bike. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what do you guys think? Would you go out of your way after hours to deliver some pineapples? Julie Martin says, hell no. Like, bro, when you sleep. I know, Milchick, he's a machine. He just goes. He's at the office in the morning before the innies, stays well after the innies leave, delivers pineapples in the dead of night. Like, yeah, when does this dude ever sleep? For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could deliver pineapples at midnight for my day job. The incentive would have to be good. It would have to at least be time and a half, or double time even, maybe. I don't know. I don't
would.
know.
I love the drama. I love the drama and the office like gossip. So I would be like, yes, why are they getting pineapples? I want to take it. I want to deliver it. And I want to know like the inside of it. Like, why are they getting it? Why are you getting an arrangement? What did he do? What's going on? If I could read the card, yes.
Yeah, if the card wasn't sealed and you can peek open and read it just a little bit, that might be worth the delivery in and of itself. Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. I feel like Gemma never sleeps. Yeah, I mean, I feel like maybe Gemma herself, I don't think ever sleeps, while Miss Casey seems to only always sleep. Kind of polar opposites, where Gemma's always awake and Miss Casey's always asleep, because we hear Miss Casey in season 1 say to Mark, the few hours that she spent on the Severance floor observing Heliar was the longest span of time that she had ever been awake for. Other than that, Gemma is always kind of, or Miss Casey is always in shutdown mode or in Gemma mode. She's got all these other Gemma personas. It seems like they very rarely use her as Miss Casey unless they're sending her to the Severance floor to do a wellness session. So yeah, I definitely get the feeling that Gemma probably doesn't sleep a whole lot, while Miss Casey does nothing but sleep. A little kind of difference, yin and yang, opposites. He didn't even have a sidecar on his bike to carry all those edible arrangements. That's what was so puzzling. And I remember a lot of people bringing that up, actually. Like, how is he carrying these pineapple extravagant freaking little baskets while he's on a bike? I did see a lot of people bringing that up because, yeah, he didn't have a side battle. He didn't have a side bag or anything like that. It didn't look like we could see anything strapped to his back. The back of his seat or anything like that. Yeah, how do you transport these things to begin with? I don't know. Maybe you just have to suspend disbelief every once in a while with shows like this. I did also hear people saying that he might have taken a different vehicle to deliver the pineapples, but I could have sworn we see him on the street bike, and then 2 seconds later we see him arriving at a house with the pineapple in hand. Because I could have sworn he was on the bike, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
That's what I
But
thought.
yeah.
That's what I remember.
Yeah.
I remember that because he also visits Mark, and that's when Rickon delivers that iconic line, which if I was Rickon, that's what I would be focusing on. He's like, "Oh, I like your helmet." Like about like I like basically the equivalent of, "Oh, I like your outfit." In the middle of this chaos and this horrible thing that has happened, Rickon can only focus on how good Mr. Milkshake looks.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. Yeah, that's his first thing he notices, the awesome helmet. Like, it's such a cool accessory. I love your helmet, kind of thing. That's a good point. Like, recognizing an outfit. Yeah, poor Gemma. I mean, again, you did feel really bad for Gemma. By the time you get to the end of that episode, it's like holy shit, how much more are they going to put this poor woman through? Like, you really do feel bad for her by the time you get to the end of that episode. She just looks so inflated, so deflated, so completely defeated after her escape attempt was thwarted. It was a tough episode to watch. But now in this episode, we finally see the reunion of Mark and Cobell, and a lot of us have been wondering, how is this reunion going to take place? What are Mark and Cobell? What is the dynamic going to be like between Mark and Cobell? And in this episode, we got a little good look at that, whereas they're not super friendly, but they're not acting like super enemies. But Mark is making it very clear that he doesn't trust her. He does not trust Cobell, which he shouldn't. He shouldn't trust her. I mean, even if they are hoping to use her expertise and her knowledge on Lumen to help get Gemma out, there's no way you can trust her. You just cannot trust Cobell. You got to keep one eye on her at all times. So this is going to be an interesting alliance, I feel, because I feel, the episode ends with her attempting to sneak Mark into the birthing cabin. We see him kind of hiding in the back, and we see her and Devin kind of trying to sneak into this birthing cabin, where luckily Cobell knows the hidden kind of secret code, which just happens to be the plot of the whole entire Twilight Zone episode, The After Hours, which we discussed earlier as well. But this is going to be interesting. I mean, how is this going to go? I mean, now that he was snuck in, now that he did have a chance to kind of talk with Cobell, and all of this, what's the next step of their plan going to be, I wonder? I mean, is it go right to Lumen and try and rescue Gemma? Does Cobell know some kind of secret entrance into the severed floor, or a secret entrance into the testing room floor that they could maybe utilize to get Gemma in and out without the rest of the building knowing? Like, how much can Cobell help here ultimately? And what is their ultimate plan going to be? How do Gemma and Mark and Devin how do Mark, Devin, and Cobell rescue Gemma at the end of the day? How do they pull this off? I mean, after we saw that testing room floor, it seems like getting to that testing room floor is going to be next to impossible, especially if there's only that one entrance via that elevator. I guess that's a potential possibility where Cobell could come in. Is there a secret backdoor entrance to the testing room floor that you don't need to use the elevator to get to, maybe? I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see, how are they going to rescue Gemma? What is their ultimate plan going to be?
Yeah, well, it takes me back to what you have shown us, right? So I try to keep the previews that you show us in mind so that I could eliminate what we have seen and what we haven't seen. So we know that the next episode is going to be violent. We know that it's rated differently than all the other episodes, the previous ones. We also know that there is a scene where Mr. Drummond is attacking Mark and slamming him against the wall. So when the question is brought up of, how are they going to get Gemma out? We see that Helly is already working on making her way to the elevator, right? Her father stopped her and said something like "my Helly," which I thought was strange because that's kind of
Yes.
nice. He
Yes.
calls his child fetid muppet, but with Helly, he said "my Helly."
My
And
Helly.
that seemed
Oh,
too nice. That seemed just way too nice for him, especially since they consider the innies to not be people, to be servants and subhuman.
no.
Um, but it makes me think that they're going to go in there and take it by force, and therefore
Okay.
the violence rating.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. I mean, again, I can't remember any other episodes of Severance where they specifically come out ahead of time and let us know that this finale is going to be rated M for mature and V for violence. There is going to be violence in this next episode. And again, I mean, would you rate an entire episode like that if it was only going to be Drummond pushing Mark up against the wall? I mean, I suppose it's possible, but when I think of them going out of their way to rate this episode or categorize it differently than they ever have before, something tells me there's going to be something a little more violent than just that Drummond scene that we saw in the trailer. I'll be surprised if that's the only physical confrontation that happens in this episode. I'm expecting something bigger to happen to earn that TVMA and to earn that rating of the violence that's going to be coming apparently in this next episode. And yes, we got the grim barbarity of optics and design, which we still don't know a whole lot about, but a lot of people have pointed out, myself included, that if you look a little closer into the very back right, these individuals standing here looking at the slaughter look an awful lot like Mark and Irving, right there in the background. And yeah, I don't
Mhm.
know. That's going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting reveal, I guess, to see what kind of violence they have planned for the finale, and why are they going out of their way to rate it as such. If they're going that far, I again I get the feeling it's going to be more than just a simple push up against the wall. Something else is going to happen. Something else is going to happen. I think. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, guys. I don't know. I can't believe we're entering the final episode. Like, holy cow! Like this, it does seem like this season whipped by super fast, and I've been enjoying it. I've really, I can't say I can point to any one episode in season two and say that was just an episode that I hated. That was an episode that I didn't like. But it's just insane to know that we're heading into the final episode right now. And yeah, Cobell in that last scene was like the devil. She did kind of look a little devilish, didn't she? Like with the fire behind her, her standing in the middle of the room like that. I was totally expecting her to say that line right there when Mark entered the room. Like, Mark, there will be no honeymoon ending for you. Like she did have this kind of evil, devilish kind of vibe going on against her. Again, the fire in the background was very noticeable for sure. So I agree there. It kind of reminded me of a little bit of that scene with Burt during the dinner, where a lot of people were pointing out that Burt is making it known that he believes that his Audi is going to hell. And a lot of people were kind of seeing that maybe Burt is already in hell, the way we see him portrayed in that episode, sitting right in front of the fire kind of consuming his kind of silhouette, like right behind him, like he's already sitting in the fire kind of thing. I kind of got a similar vibe to this scene when I saw this as well. Like it's already Cobell standing in the fire in a sense. But yeah, looking very devilish and very hellish with the fire behind her.
And you know what, guys? Sevis, we were all wondering when we saw the episode where she almost runs Mark over,
Mhm.
and he's asking her, do you know something about Gemma? But she can't say anything, so she just gives this guttural scream of frustration because she can't speak about it. She can't reveal the truth and almost runs him over. Now that we know that she is the creator of the chip, it all makes more sense. Her frustration wasn't just, I can't help you, I can't tell you the truth, but her frustration was, this is all mine. I built the entire thing. The questions that you're asking, I could actually give you every single answer, but I
Yeah,
can't.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a good point. I mean, And it did. That episode really did change the whole course of the show. Like now that we do know Cobell was the inventor of this technology, it does change a lot. And I imagine like when we do go back and do a rewatch of season one and of season two, having that knowledge in our mind that Cobell created this technology, I imagine it's even going to paint certain season one in a little bit of a different light. Like I imagine we'll see some certain Cobell scenes in season one, and maybe certain things will make a little bit more sense now that we have this context. Like the scene you used to bring up when we saw one of the first interactions we had with Gemma, or with Miss Casey rather, on the Severance floor, and her speaking to Mark and saying to Mark, "This is the longest I've ever been awake when I spent this much time observing Helly." And we see on the we flash to another scene and we see Cobell is watching the security camera of this, and we see how angry Cobell gets, and she says, "Get her down to the testing room floor." It's little stuff like that that I imagine we're going to have much better context for when we go back and do a rewatch. Now that we know Cobell did create this technology, I think we're going to see little things, and that'll just give us just better context as to why she's so invested at being head of this Severance floor. And I think it's going to paint some certain scenes in a different light when we do a rewatch.
Now that you bring up that scene, it makes me think. I was thinking maybe Cobell has been trying to help Mark and Gemma by bringing in the candle and by trying to make them remember each other. But now that you bring it up in that way, there is potential for her to simply have been angry because she's not privy to this information, because she's seeing my technology is advancing while I'm not privy to the information. They're actually doing very well because they are not remembering each other. So while Mr. Milkshake said, that's a good thing, it's like, I know that's a good thing, but that is my technology. I'm not part of it. I only get to see it in this distant way. So now it's making sense as to why she was so upset, so angry.
It does, yeah. It gives you that added context. Like once you understand a little bit more about a character and their motivations and what they've been through, you do. You just start to understand Cobell a little bit more, why she's doing some of the things she's doing, why she's so invested in only being head of the Severance floor. It's just it does paint it in a better light. It gives you that much needed context. That's why I don't mind those episodes every once in a while where they kind of just give us a good old backstory, because I thought it was a good episode within a backstory. Yes, it was a backstory episode, but it was still a pretty good episode. It told a really good story of not only what happened to Cobell, but it told a really interesting story of what happened to this poor small coastal town that Lumen just completely ravaged. And it shows the very real world consequences of what happens when these big multinational corporations set up shop in a small town like this and mine it for its resources. In this case, the resources being its very people, child labor, and all of that. You really get to see the devastation that Lumen left in its wake, not only personally to Cobell and her family, but structurally to the town as well, economically. Like it looks like the town never fully recovered. And that's why I like these episodes every once in a while. And unfortunately, that is something that we see in our life, in our real world, where corporations will set up in a super small town, whether that town will have a natural resource or a resource like a workforce, whatever the case may be. They leave it decimated when they leave because they put nothing back into the town. They'll mine the town for as many resources as they need, but they don't put anything back into the town before they leave. So these towns are left so desolate and destitute by the time they're done. And that's one thing I liked about last week's episode. It wasn't just a backstory on Cobell. It was a full-on, like very real world look at what happens to some of these small towns in the wake of these corporations kind of moving in and just setting up shop. An ether factory, nonetheless. Child labor in an ether factory. It's like you can totally understand why so many people grew up and developed cancer and all of these terminal illnesses, like Cobell's mom. So I liked it. I thought it was a good episode. It was a good episode that gave us some good insight on Cobell, but it also told a very, very, very real and unfortunate story that does happen in the real world.
Yeah, the child labor part of it, I was very surprised because we know that Severance tackles difficult topics. However, when it comes to child labor and bringing up the real world of it all, unfortunately, products that we consume, that we admire, companies that we revere,
Yeah.
at times, while they do not have child labor in this country, they do have child labor in other countries where they are manufacturing what we are consuming. And therefore, we are part of that dynamic, but it's easier to not acknowledge that we're part of that dynamic because it's not happening in the country. So it
Exactly.
made it very difficult. And the fact that she mentioned that she had not gotten high since she was 8 years old,
Yes.
it just it breaks your heart, because that's the last time that she did it. But when I heard that, immediately I thought, when was the first time?
Yes.
If
Oh
that
my
was the
God.
last time, when was the first time?
Yeah.
And we see what it did to Hamilton. We see how it changed his life, how it traumatized him to the point where he didn't want to meet her there because he couldn't stand the sight of that factory. So it's a super serious topic. I'm wondering what they're going to bring up in the finale,
Oof. Yeah.
which, right? Kind of terrified. I think that the rating is kind of making me nervous because I'm thinking, like, what's it gonna be? It's
Yeah.
violence. Like, what is it gonna be, really?
Yeah, it does have me very curious. It does. It has me very curious as to what we're going to see in this final episode for sure. Because yeah, I don't recall an episode ever kind of putting that rating or that depiction on any of their episodes before. It's the first time I've ever seen it. But yeah, I mean, that's why these episodes are good every once in a while. It's not only giving you backstory on Cobell, but it's telling you a compelling story at the same time, and kind of, painting a real world insight, a real look behind the curtain sometimes at to what of some of these companies do. Some of these companies that we use on an everyday basis, where, as PM said, this stuff might not be happening here in the States, but it is happening in other countries, unfortunately. And yes, it's one of those things where you don't see it right in your front yard, so you kind of don't think about it, but it is definitely a part of reality. It is part of how these corporations operate. And that's why I like these backstory episodes, especially when they tell full, complete, compelling stories like that. You get the backstory from Cobell, learn a little bit more about her, peel back her layers. We get to understand her on a human level, what she's been through, while at the same time, they're telling this very profound story about what happened to this small town. And it very much parallels Cobell's story. Cobell's childhood and this town were both kind of destroyed by Lumon. And it paints a very interesting look at at what happens to these small towns, for sure. What if Cobell realizes that she's never going to be recognized for her knowledge and creation and everything, and maybe this could be perfect time for her to collaborate with Mark? And that's an interesting idea. I mean, because I imagine Cobell, at some point, she's very loyal to Lumon. We know that. We know that she had given her research up, or Jame Egan had stolen her research and told her that if she ever threatened to reveal the truth, that she would be banished. So it's not like this was some kind of work that Jame Egan stole from her and they never discussed it. It seemed like this was work that Jame took right from her and straight up told her, you better keep quiet about this or you will be banished. So yeah, I mean, she's pretty much seen her whole life's work get stolen from her ever since she first created this chip. Is she finally getting to a point now where she just wants credit for her work? She wants people to know she was the one behind this? I don't know. But it did seem like that was weighing on her in that episode, especially towards the end when she reveals it to the aunt and she's screaming, my designs, blueprints, schematics, outtime protocol, all of it. It's like you could see the frustration in her face and in her body language that she was super upset that someone had stolen her entire life's work. And, she was led to believe that Kier's knowledge is for all. So she kind of didn't question it. That plus the whole adage added, you'll get banished if you talk about this kind of thing. But yeah, I guess it'll be interesting to see where Cobell's head is at right now. Is she, now that she has kind of severed her ties with Lumon, is she going to be of a mind where she wants credit for her work now? I don't know. And if so, could that lean her a little more towards going public with this information, which could be super risky against a massive corporation like Lumon, who probably has police, journalists, everything on the payroll? I imagine, you go to the wrong news outlet to try and reveal this, and they're under Lumon's thumb. There you go. Whistleblower, Operation Whistleblower, dead in its tracks, along with maybe Cobell also, getting unalived as well. It's going to be interesting to see what she does from here. Is she going to seek that recognition out, or is she, at this point, just out for revenge? I don't know.
Well, now we know from Burt that they actually disappear people and they unalive them. So we know from Burt, because he kind of hints at that. He says, I never hurt anyone, however, I drove them. And we get that reading in Irving's notebook about people disappearing, not being found. We know that they have Gemma, they have her body, they have her physically. So if I was Cobell, I would be concerned that they would do the same thing to me as they have done to Gemma, or potentially even use her technology against her, sever her to a person that does not remember, doesn't recall reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, could definitely see that. I mean, I could totally see a poetic kind of karmic weird sense of irony of it being used against her, like you mentioned. I think that could be a very interesting route for them to go down, where it's being used against her. The one thing that she wants to get credit for, the one thing that she wants to oversee her entire life, that she wants to see what her creation has wrought, where it has gone, where it's going, which also paints another thing in season 1 in a little bit of a better light as well, in terms of why she was so adamant that reintegration wasn't possible. She created this technology, and as far as she knew, this was an irreversible process. There's no way you could reverse being severed. So when Ragabi kind of cracks the code of reintegration, I think Cobell gets incredibly intrigued and goes as far as to go to Petey's funeral and zap his freaking chip out of his head to study it herself. So yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I feel like technology and someone's inventions being used against them, it also harkens back a little bit to the Victor Frankenstein kind of parallels that we've been seeing on the show all season, where that is ultimately Victor Frankenstein's ultimate downfall, where he pours his whole life's work into this one creation, into creating life where life was not meant to be created, only to eventually see that one creation ultimately be his downfall, being used against him in a sense. So yeah, I love the tie-ins that we see to Twilight Zone, to Frankenstein. Like, there's so many crossovers. You can see that they're pulling influence from so many really good stories that have been around for decades now. And the Twilight Zone one was a really, really nice touch. I very much enjoyed that. Very much enjoyed that. She was okay with them taking credit for her work because she was a devout believer. But once they started abusing and disrespecting her as a boss, that resentment started growing. And I think that's exactly it. I think it broke her programming, essentially. She kind of broke her conditioning. She had been put through that same kind of indoctrination just as Miss Huang is being put through now, to the point where, yeah, she was just so loyal to this company. I mean, yeah, I imagine the threat of banishment was always in the back of her mind, but she did seem like very much a true believer. She has this whole shrine to Kier in her home that only she can see. That's not something you would put up if you were faking it. So yeah, she was very loyal to Lumon. She was very much she was drinking the Kool-Aid, as it were, full on. And yes, I do think that was the final straw for her. Them kind of just throwing her aside, throwing her out like she was nothing. And then on top of it, the very specific conversation that Cobell and Helena have in the parking lot, the last time Helena and Cobell meet, where Helena straight up tells Cobell, I think you have overestimated your contributions to this company and overstated your blessings, and undervalued your blessings, or something along those lines. And you definitely get the sense that, Cobell hearing that must have been, it's like, okay, this is it now. This is the final straw. You guys have completely stolen my life's work. I've got no credit for it. And now on top of it, you're throwing me out like a piece of garbage over something that wasn't even that big. I mean, I get the overtime contingency thing was, it was a little bit damaging, but I feel like Milchick's Orpo was way more of a catastrophe, and they didn't fire him after that. So I feel like, Cobell getting fired, I could totally understand why she is this bitter. I mean, she created this company, she created this technology. Lumen is what they are because of her hard work, because of her efforts. And then they go and just throw her out like that. Yeah, I 100% agree with you, FaZe. I think that was the moment where she realized, okay, enough is enough. This is it. I'm done.
What's really interesting, Interface, is that both of our characters that have had the same position, Cobell and Milchick, both stopped really buying into the company the minute that they realized there's this respect behind the company. For him, it was the minute that they started, like Drummond started making him go through the break room apology. He realized this company doesn't respect me, finally. And for Cobell, it was getting a cardboard box to put all of your stuff in. She had this cardboard box just walking around. She built the company. She literally built the company, and she's putting all of her stuff in this cardboard box and being walked out with like security. That it's insulting. It's adding insult to injury. While it wasn't a super positive thing what she did, it's still very insulting to spend your entire life. We see how old she is. You spend your entire life dedicated and working for a company, and they just throw you out as if it's just anybody else, any other employee, as if you didn't create the technology. Now, it makes me recall that parking lot scene. A lot of people were wondering, does Elena know that the technology belongs to Cobell? I believe that we have a clue that she does know, because in that parking lot scene, we see Cobell instantly get super afraid and run away when Elena says, "Come on, let's go talk to the board. We could start on a clean slate." Which is one of the things that she wrote in her notebook. Therefore, saying Elena is telling her, I know this is yours. Like, come on, right? And she knows they're gonna disappear me. That's why she like took off, because she was aware now that Elena knows that that is her technology.
Yes, I love that. I think that's perfect. I think that fits so well, because and I know that line kind of stood out to some people as well. Her specifically saying clean slate, and like you said, us seeing clean slate in her notes and all of that. Yeah, no, I think that totally fits. I think that is 100%. A strong possibility that was Helena's kind of subtle way of letting her know that I know what you did, and I'm still willing to say that you overestimated your contributions to the company. So no, I think you're right. I like that. I like that. I like that a lot. It's yeah, I like that. Yeah, the realist is the part of control. It is. It's all about control of this technology at the end of the day. That is the goal. Get this technology to where Lumen wants it, but ultimately to be able to control it. And if I was Lumen, I would want to be the only company that had control of a technology like this. You want to be able to control the market. You want to be able to control where this technology goes, the future of it. And that's how I would feel if I was Lumen, for sure. But yeah, I like that. I like that. And yeah, clean slates is one of the options right next to the Glasgow block. Yeah, we got the Glasgow block, clean slate. We have branch transfer. There it is, clean slate right up there. Third one on the list. Definitely very much an option for the chip. And a lot of people think that clean slate is the memory wipe, where they can just completely wipe an entire innie's memories, or maybe even an outie too, for that matter, or both. Love that. Love that. Yeah, spot on. He's overseeing a department that's supposedly in charge of delivering the work that will bring the company's most glorious day, but they still treat him like trash. Exactly, and that's and Milchick he's the next Cobell. He is in Cobell's position now, where she was in the first season. And again, the way they kind of just threw Cobell out and threw Milchick in there without a second glance. It shows you how much they value their middle management, which is not all that much, especially someone like Cobell, who, again, literally, she is the reason this company is what it is. She created this technology. But it shows you how expendable Lumon views their employees, even someone that has contributed as much as Cobell has herself, which she's contributed a freaking ton. So yeah, the disrespect is part of the control. Absolutely. Absolutely. Cobell was fired because she didn't tell them Helly tried to commit suicide. And yeah, I just feel like that's such a I don't want to say that's a nothing burger, but I feel like Milchick's mess up was way worse. Way worse. Like everything that happened on the Orpo with Helly and Helena. Well, actually Helena, because she was Helena at that point. She wasn't Helly. Actually, Helena, the daughter of the CEO, the next CEO of the company, with seeing her life being put in mortal danger the way it was at Irving's hands, with him straight up practically waterboarding her just over and over again in this freaking freezing cold lake. Everything that happened on the Orpo, all of the cluster F that came from the Orpo, it just seems like that's a way bigger offense than what happened on Cobell's watch. I feel like what happened on Cobell's watch is tame compared to what happened on Milchick's watch. Yet, for some reason, they were super quick to fire Cobell, where they're not as quick to fire Milchick. They're quick to come down on him and give him that negative performance review, and Drummond's here kind of pressing him. Luckily Milchick kind of stands up for himself in this moment. But if we're to weigh whose kind of act had more damage for Lumon in the long run, I would say the Orpo was more damaging for Lumon in the long run than what happened under Cobell's watch. What about you? Do you think Cobell's what happened under Cobell's watch, do you think that was worse, that happened under Milchick's, or do you think the Orpo was a little bit worse in terms of overall damage? Because they lost a whole employee at that point. Helena became uncovered. I feel like the Orpo did a little more damage overall.
I would agree. I would think that the Orbo did more damage because it messed with the person that we know is essential to Lumon, Mark. We know that Mark has become the focus of the entire company, to the point where they are wondering if he's going to come into work. He's at 96%, so super close. And this, what Elena did at the Orbo, could have potentially made Mark Audi not want to come back into work or to quit, right? So that in itself puts everything in jeopardy, because we know that Mark has become essential. Even at the price of Elena suffering. We see her telling the board, they're animals, they almost killed me. And they say back to Elena, we're giving Mark what he wants, including Helly. So that in itself shows you that when it comes to priorities, Elena's down here and Mark is always up here. They don't care what happens to her physically. They're giving him Helly because he wants her there. So that in itself, anytime you're messing with Mark, that is a big problem for Lumon.
Yeah, I think that's probably, yeah. I mean, when you factor in the Mark stuff, yeah. I mean, Lumon is incredibly invested in Mark. Like, Mark is everything to them. Like, without Mark, there is no Cold Harbor. It seems like they've been very clear that Mark is the only one that can complete this file, most likely due to his emotional and deep connection to Gemma, which nobody else has. So yes, I mean, when you factor in the Mark stuff, it does become a little clearer. And as Does This Matter brings up, I feel like they were looking for excuses to fire Cobell for some reason. I saw that they wanted Milchick to be in charge. And maybe that was it, like you just mentioned, PM. Maybe that was a big part of it. What when they found out what Cobell was doing on her off time, when they found out that she was trying to get closer to Mark, trying to get closer to his sister, babysitting his sister's baby. Like, it was really getting weird at that point. Like, we still don't really know why Cobell even did that, too. Like, we're still not sure why Cobell created this Mrs. Selvig persona and moved in next door to Mark. We still don't know what she ultimately wanted. What was the ultimate goal? I know Milchick tells us the goal at the beginning of season 2 was Cobell was searching for the thruple, but I get the feeling that's not the whole truth. I don't think Cobell was looking to hook up with Innie and Outie Mark. Something tells me Milchick is telling another one of his tall tales there, like the biggest waterfall in the world, kind of thing. But yeah,
We do
that's
know. We do know. So the podcast. So
the
in the
podcast revealed
podcast,
it. Okay,
yes.
awesome. Tell me, please.
So in the podcast, Ben Stiller had the actress that plays Miss Cobell, and they were talking about her persona, the Miss Selvig persona, and how weird she was with Mark. And what they said is that Miss Selvig is Cobell's
Mom.
attempt at a normal life.
Okay.
Because her upbringing was not normal. Who she is not normal, right? She wanted to pretend to be a normal person, and this is the most normal person she could come up with. It's still incredibly strange, right?
Really weird, yeah.
Incredibly strange. And what they said is that at the beginning, she only created the persona to get closer to Mark, to be able to see from far away her creation. To be able to kind of have some of the information that she is not privy to because she's not working on the technology.
Okay.
However, they stated in the podcast that after a while, she began to enjoy it, creating friendships,
She liked
getting
it.
involved with Devin. Yeah, getting involved with Devin. And actually becoming friends with Mark, right? Bringing over cookies. So even though this is an incredibly strange persona for somebody who has such a traumatic childhood, this was escapism, and it was the most normal person that she could come up with.
Wow. That's so funny to know that this Mrs. Selvig persona is the normal version of Cobell, even though she was super batshit. But in like a kind and kind of loving, annoying, neighborly kind of way. But no, that's actually super interesting, and that's why these podcasts really are super beneficial to listen to, because you do get those kind of good tidbits that aren't in the show that you wouldn't know otherwise. So no, I'm so glad you saw that. No, and that makes sense. I think that does make sense, because I do believe we heard Patricia Arquette talk about like her Cobell persona was a reflection of who her aunt was, like the stern, kind of strict kind of way that her aunt was. And I wouldn't be surprised if the mother, if the Mrs. Selvig kind of persona was her attempt at being normal, maybe more in the vein of who her mother might have been. But no, I love that idea that she kind of just created this persona because she wanted to feel what it was like to be a normal human, and this is what she comes up with, Mrs. Selvig of all things, and how it might have started off as a way to just get close to observe her creation. But I could totally see her growing into it and actually starting to like this. I'm actually starting to like being Mrs. Selvig, actually starting to enjoy getting close to Devin and Mark and the baby. It's giving her a social life that I imagine she's probably never had in her entire life. Very similar to how Helena looks at Helly and sees a freedom and a life that she was never able to have in terms of the freedom to pursue your own heart. Cobell was probably never given similar opportunities, where she grew up in Lumon, kind of completely indoctrinated from a very young age. She probably never really had the opportunity to cultivate a life and just friends of her own. So while it might have started off as a kind of assignment or a way to watch her creation, I think that makes perfect sense the way you say it, in terms of it turning into something more, where it does start to become, she's actually enjoying this. She enjoys being Mrs. Selvig. I can totally see that. Yeah. Totally
And we see that it is a sort of comfort, because if we recall, the day that she is fired, she's destroying her shrine. She's in her house. She is so upset. She's destroying and breaking everything. And Mark comes to the door to ask her if she wants to go to this book reading that she was invited to as Miss Selvig. And she is in such despair. She has just gone through probably what is the worst thing in her life, because she gave her life to this company and now she's being let go. So probably the worst thing that she's, gone through, because she believes so deeply in the company. And instead of saying no, like I'm dropping the act, she says, yes, give me a minute, actually. And she gets
Yeah.
into her persona and she goes to the book reading and she's totally into the book. And you could see that she finds comfort. In the worst day, she found comfort in becoming this other persona and going with Mark's family to spend time with them.
She did. I mean, it's just like this small little human interaction that she never would have had a chance to experience otherwise. And no, I think that makes total sense now. Like, especially the way she described it, the way you described it, it fits. Because I mean, we are all human at the end of the day. Every human, no matter what you are, no matter how kind of stern you are, no matter how serious Cobell is, every human at one point or another craves that human connection with somebody else. That's just natural part of being human. You want company, you want friends, you want loved ones. Everybody wants that. Who doesn't want that kind of feeling? Even Cobell, after all of the indoctrination, everything she's been through since a child, someone like her might even crave that a little bit more than a regular average person, because they were never given the privilege or the opportunity to have that before. So they might value that more than someone who grew up with it their whole lives, who kind of takes it for granted because they just grew up with it. But for her, this is such a huge opportunity, a huge privilege that she was never given. So I could totally see Cobell even cherishing it more than a regular person. And I could totally see why she kind of fell into it and it became genuine for her. She wants that human
Yeah.
connection.
And you bring up Elena, which is a perfect parallel to somebody wanting a life that would be better than what they have, even though they possess a level of stature within society that other people would look at and say, I would want that. I would want to be so successful at my job. I would want to be Elena and be part of this legacy family. So while they possess that, they don't possess an actual life. In this episode, we found out something really interesting, that Elena lives with her father. So that in itself gave me a little bit more insight into Elena and how messed up she is. Because I was thinking when Holly said, oh, it was just an empty apartment and there was a night gardener, I was thinking maybe Elena does live on her own. She's a very lonely person, but she lives on her own. But in this episode, we discover that it's worse. She lives with her father. What is worse than living on your own is living with this type of father who is micromanaging what you're eating and how you're eating it, and is expressing his disappointment at you over breakfast.
Yeah, it's worse, right? Like that's a really good point. I mean, what is worse, living alone, ultimately having nobody, or living with one person that is Jame freaking Egan, for crying out loud? That just the super disapproving father, the father that, I mean, where she's the daughter that could never be good enough in his eyes, no matter what she does. And like you said, even going so far as to critiquing the way she's eating a freaking egg. Like, yeah, you start to think that living under that is probably even worse than living alone. At least if you're living alone, yeah, it's lonely, but you're not actively being hurt on top of being lonely every day. And that's kind of what Helena is probably going through. She's lonely and she's being berated every single day on top of it. So yeah, I would definitely prefer to live alone than to live with only someone like Jame Egan. Like, I could take me out to the woodshed, put me on my misery if I have to live with Jame Egan. Shit. But no, that's it's yeah, I would definitely say alone is probably better. I would rather be alone than live with someone like Jame Egan, for sure. And yeah, trauma bonds. Trauma bonds people. And we see that happen a lot of the times. That's a lot of the times how opposites will end up attracting. And I think we'll end up seeing that on this show at numerous points, where we'll start to see the the shared trauma that Lumen has put all of these different characters through will start to bring them together. It will start to we will start to see them form bonds with one another. I do very much believe that. Probably in season 3, depending on how season 2 ends, I could totally see that happening because, Lumen has left so much death and devastation and damage in its wake to so many different characters. So yeah, I could totally understand where, trauma could bond a lot of these characters where they do all have at least one shared experience. Lumen has destroyed a part of their lives in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, I could totally see trauma bonding some of these characters and bringing them together a little bit closer in season 3, for sure. For sure. Man, what an episode. What an episode. I gotta say, I enjoyed this episode a lot. I did enjoy this episode a lot. It was nice to kind of get back to the Severance form, the regular kind of Severance kind of blueprint that we have become accustomed to. I know not everybody likes the deviation episodes that only feature one character only and not the rest of the cast. Totally understand that. I always want to see the whole cast too. But I enjoyed the Cobell episode, but I definitely enjoyed this one a little bit more than the Cobell episode, I feel. While I do wish there was a little bit more meat on the bone in terms of kind of advancing the plot and the story a little bit more. I feel like we did get some small snippets at the very least in terms of finding out a little bit more about Jame Egan and how apparently he's been impregnating employees for Lord knows how long, like just to make this dude even creepier than he already was. And of course, I think we got that little snippet from Cobell, which was pretty interesting as well, where she informed us as the audience, which was something we had been talking about for a while. Many of you had been talking about it as well, that maybe when Cold Harbor reaches 100%, it's going to be the end of Gemma, the death of Gemma, either physically or the death of Gemma's persona, where only Miss Casey is remaining after Cold Harbor is completed. And we did get a little bit more confirmation on that. We also got a little bit more confirmation that Irving and Burt and their kind of storyline, a lot of us were very suspicious of Audi Burt and whether or not he was secretly working for Lumen. We got that confirmation in this episode where yes, indeed, Audi Burt, has indeed been doing very dirty deeds for Lumen for quite a long time by the looks of it, in terms of driving people where Lumen wants him to drive them, most likely for them to be unalived and taken off the board, most likely. So yeah, overall, definitely enjoyed the episode. I mean, a little bit more meat always would have been a little bit better. It seems like they're setting this finale up to be quite a finale, if nothing else. There are still a lot of loose threads, a lot of storylines that still need to be wrapped up a little bit tighter before they end the season, which is what I'm hoping they're doing. So they definitely have a lot on their plate for this finale. They're going to have to tie a lot together, and hopefully in a cohesive way that sets up season 3 and, sets up something interesting for season 3, which I imagine will probably be another kind of cliffhanger that season 2 ends on, setting up this next third season. But hopefully before then, we will find out what Cold Harbor really is, what the goal of Cold Harbor is, what will really happen to Gemma when Cold Harbor is reaching 100%, what is going to be the ultimate aftermath, what is Cold Harbor really. And since next week's episode is not only the finale, but is also titled Cold Harbor, I think we're going to get that answer. I would be very surprised if they put the whole Cold Harbor storyline and pushed it ahead to season 3. I think at the very least, we'll find out what Cold Harbor is, but in terms of what the consequences of it are going to be, that's probably something that we'll be diving into in season 3. But I think we'll at least find out what Cold Harbor is at the very least in the season 2 finale. But before we get ready to close out, of course, one thing we always like to do here on these streams is ask you guys in the chat, and I always like to get PM and I's ratings down on record as well. How do you guys rate this episode? Season 2, episode 9 of Severance, the After Hours. Where do you guys rank this episode on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being horrible and 10 being perfect? What score do you guys give episode 9? PM, where are you thinking with episode 9 so far? What kind of score do you think this one should get?
I always tend to go with the Sevies because this is the best chat in the world. This is the chat that knows all. And I'm going to go with 8. because they did the entire Twilight Zone line.
Yeah.
Like they gave us Marsha, the ninth floor, and the gold thimble. That's an 8. That's an 8.
They did. Honestly, if it didn't have the Twilight Zone direct tie-in, I probably would have rated it a point or a half of a point lower than I'm going to right now. But me, I'm gonna. Again, just after one viewing, after one short discussion on it, again, PM and I will also be live again Saturday night at our usual time, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the channel, and we will also be diving much, much deeper into this episode. And by then, we'll all have had a chance to watch it a few more times as well. So definitely come back and hang out with us this Saturday as well, and we'll see if any of our scores go up or if they go down between now and then, because we will be diving even deeper into this episode on our Saturday show. But I see most of the chat is giving it an 8. We got another 8. We got another 8. We got an 8.5. We got another 8. We got a 9.4, which is a pretty solid score. We got a 7 from Golden Child. We got an 8. We got an 8.5, a 9. Pretty high scores for the most part. We got a 10 from Christine Jellybean. Wow, I think Christine Jellybean earlier said that this was her second favorite episode of Severance ever. So that's pretty high. That's pretty high score considering how many good episodes there are. We got another 8 indeed. Yeah, end of season 1 was a 10. Season 2, episode 4, maybe 9.5. Yeah, episode 4 was epic, wasn't it? It really was. And I think season 1, the finale of season 1, I did rate that one at like a solid 9 or a 9.5. It's hard for me to give out 10s. Like, I need to see like some really interesting things to give something a 10, because nothing's ever perfect. I think there's only one episode of television that I've ever ranked at a 10 in terms of shows that I've covered. But I mean, I have given out plenty of 9s and 9.5s because there are some phenomenal episodes of Severance.
Okay.
Like, really good.
No. Everybody wants to know, what is it that you gave a 10 to?
Season 1, episode 8 of House of the Dragon, the final performance of Paddy Considine as King Viserys. It was one of the best pieces of acting performances I have ever seen in my life. Paddy Considine was the backbone of season 1 of House of the Dragon, and while the show as a whole will never be as good as Game of Thrones, that one in particular episode and that one in particular performance from Paddy Considine in episode 8 was probably some of the best acting I have ever seen in my life. So I think that's the only episode I've ever given a 10 to, because it was perfect in my opinion in terms of start to finish, not just the story, but everything in that whole episode, the cinematography, the writing, everything was good in that one. So I think that's the only episode I've ever given a 10 to. Paddy Considine's final performance, his last-ditch effort to try and do everything he can to save his family. It really is the story of a dying man doing everything he can to save his family before he goes on to the grave, knowing that a devastating war is going to break out if he cannot bring his family together. And it's so well written, it's so well conceived, and Paddy Considine just gives one of the best performances I have ever seen on screen anywhere. So that's the only thing I've ever given a 10. I've given out plenty of 9s and 9.5s, but that is my only 10. There's definitely some 10s in Game of Thrones. I was just speaking of in terms of 10s that I've given for shows that I've covered here on the channel. Game of Thrones, unfortunately, was well over when I started my channel. House of the Dragon was just starting when I started my YouTube channel. If I did have a channel back then, I definitely would have covered Thrones. And I can think of at least 3 to 5 episodes right off the top of my head of Game of Thrones that are easy 10s, like super easy 10s. Like season 1, episode 1, the pilot of Game of Thrones, definitely a 10 out of 10 in my opinion. Season 1, episode 5 of Game of Thrones, The Wolf and the Lion, definitely a 10 out of 10 episode. That's the episode that has one of my favorite scenes of Game of Thrones ever. And it's so interesting because it's a scene that wasn't even in the book. It's an improvised scene that they came up with just for the show. And it just showcases some of the most phenomenal acting I've ever seen in my life between Lena Headey and Mark Addy as Cersei and King Robert. And this was just one of the best scenes ever.
So here we sit. 17 years later, holding it all together. Don't you get tired?
Every day. What was she like?
You've never asked about her, not once. Why not?
At first, just saying her name, even in private, felt like I was breathing life back into her. And eventually it became clear that my spite didn't mean anything to you. As far as I could tell, you actually enjoyed it.
You want to know the horrible truth? I can't even remember what she looked like. I only know she was the one thing I ever wanted. Someone took her away from me. And 7 kingdoms couldn't fill the hole she left behind.
Ah, so good.
Love that. Love that.
It is just so good. It's one of the best scenes I've ever seen in my life. And and I think it's such a good scene for me because I'm such a big book fan. And you see all of the legacy behind these two characters, all the history that is there between these two characters, that if you only watch the show, a scene like that might not be as important as it is to someone who's read the books and has the extra context. But seeing all of the stuff that Cersei and Robert had been through, where they started to where they are now, to see these two characters just for the first time in their lives have an honest to gosh conversation, just actually being honest with one another and talking about something that neither of them ever wanted to talk about. Lyanna Stark. And of course, you know the history there of Lyanna Stark and Robert and Cersei and the rebellion and all of that craziness. There's a lot of weight behind that scene. That's why it's one of my favorite 10 out of 10 scenes. And then, of course, there is the phenomenal performance of Paddy Considine doing everything he can to bring his family back together.
Gladdens my heart and fills me with sorrow to see these faces around the table, yet grown so distant from each other in years past. My own face is no longer a handsome one. If indeed it ever was. But tonight, I wish you to see me as I am, your father, your brother, your husband, who may not, it seems, walk for much longer among you. Let us no longer hold ill feelings in our hearts. The crown cannot stand strong if the house of the dragon remains divided. But set aside your grievances, if not for the sake of the crown, and for the sake of this old man, who loves you all so dearly.
So good. So good. I mean, it's such a good episode. It's some of the best acting I've ever seen, and Paddy Considine really was the heart and soul, the backbone of House of the Dragon Season 1, so much to the point where Season 2 just was nowhere near as good without him, unfortunately. But yeah, here we are. Season 3 of House of the Dragon is getting ready to start filming. I'm already getting some very interesting information from all of my contacts and my spies that live close to Caracas, Spain, which is where they film all the King's Landing scenes, which is a big majority of the show this season. So I should have some pretty nice inside information coming over the next few weeks and months on Season 3 filming of House of the Dragon, which I will start doing a Song of Ice and Fire videos on again pretty soon. I know I've been getting a ton of requests for Song of Ice and Fire videos. It's been a while since I've done any of those, and that was pretty much what the channel was built on at first, was my love for A Song of Ice and Fire. So I will definitely be returning to that soon. Now with Severance coming to an end, we'll be transitioning a little bit more into The Last of Us. The Last of Us Season 2 is right around the corner, which I am super pumped for. We're probably going to give it a go and try and review The Last of Us Season 2. And any other good shows that pop up between now and then. This summer, of course, we have A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which is going to be the next big Game of Thrones spinoff. I think people are going to really love that. And then, of course, again, we'll see what other awesome shows come down the pipeline. But I'm eyeing a few different possible shows that I'm thinking about diving into here on the channel. And yeah, we'll see what happens. But as of right now, Severance has been a blast. When Severance ends, we're going to try and transition into The Last of Us Season 2, which will be, again, right around the corner. That starts April 13th, I believe, so not long after Severance is over. Last of Us Season 2 will be here, so right now is the perfect time to catch up on The Last of Us Season 1 if you haven't seen it already. And again, and any other shows that pop up between now and then, if they're good, if it's something that I'm interested in, I will definitely cover it here on the channel as well, because I don't mind covering new shows, but it's got to be something I like. That's always one promise I made to myself. I'm only ever going to cover shows that I genuinely am passionate about, and never cover a show just because it's a popular show. I want it to be stuff that I actually enjoy, that the chat will actually enjoy, stuff that people like. So yeah, there's some interesting things on the horizon. I'm looking forward to The Last of Us Season 2. The trailer they dropped the other day looked really good. We're actually rewatching Season 1 right now. It's been so long since I've seen it, so I'm kind of trying to catch up. I know PM's trying to catch up and watch Season 1 as well. So yeah, we'll be transitioning into Last of Us Season 2 pretty soon once Severance ends. And once Severance is over, if people still want Severance content, I'm totally up for that. That's one thing I did with From. When From ended, people wanted the From content to continue, so I kept the From content coming until, people weren't watching it anymore. And I'll do the same thing with Severance. Once Severance ends, if people do want to go back and do rewatches and, rewatch parties and stuff like that, totally would be down to do that if that's something you guys want to do. If you want to keep the Severance content going for a little bit while longer, talk some Season 3 predictions depending on where Season 2 ends up, that's definitely something we can do here on the channel as well. Just because Severance is over doesn't mean we have to completely stop talking about Severance. There's always more discussion to be had on the upcoming season. But that is where we are at right now, guys. Severance Season 2, Episode 9 is in the books. And, my score, that's right, 7.5. 7.5 is what I am going to give Episode 8. That may go up or it may go down after I watch the episode another time or two, because I always like to watch the episodes at least twice before I give my full take on it, because there's always stuff in the background that you might miss the first go around, and I was a little occupied when I was watching this episode because I had some other stuff going on as well. So I didn't get to pay attention as much as I would have liked to, so I'm definitely going to watch the episode again, and PM and I will be live this Saturday, like we are every week, right here on the channel, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we will be diving even deeper into Episode 9, while also taking a look ahead at Episode 10 and giving some Episode 10 predictions as well. So definitely come and hang out with us again this Saturday, right here on the channel, 9 p.m. Eastern, for the continuation of our Severance discussion. And again, want to give a huge thank you to each and every one of you for joining us this evening. It's always a ton of fun to dive into these shows, to dive into these news episodes. Always love it. Can't thank each and every one of you enough for all of the great support that you guys have been giving us. And of course, cannot thank my wonderful co-host enough, PM Philosophy, for being so freaking awesome and just killing it up here week in and week out, that I know people are loving. And if you guys haven't already, subscribe to PM Philosophy's channel. Definitely give her a sub. The link to her YouTube channel is in the description of this live stream. Definitely sub to her if you haven't already. She also has some really good Severance content on her channel as well. Definitely give her a sub. And again, thank you so much, PM, for joining me. It's always a blast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always so much fun. I love the Sevies. I always say it, you guys, but I'm going to say it again. Jeremy Sevies are the best. You guys are awesome, so amazing, so funny. I just love hanging out with you guys.
Fun. It's always a blast, and again, the chat is super fun. You guys always come up with some of the greatest takes, some of the greatest predictions. You guys have been super supportive throughout this whole ordeal, and super entertaining. I get so much entertainment diving in and doing these streams, because you guys always come with some of the coolest and funniest shit that I've ever heard. So love it. Absolutely love it. Can't thank each and every one of you enough. I'm going to drop the link to PM's channel in the live chat. There it is, ladies and gents. If you have not subscribed to PM Philosophy yet, definitely give her a sub and check out some of her Severance content. She's got some really good Severance videos up on her channel as well. And again, big thank you to each and every one of you joining us on this fine Thursday evening. We will be back this Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern to continue our Severance Season 2 discussion. And until next time, keep those tinfoil hats on, folks, and we will see you on the next one.